Hello everyone. Before we begin, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tell me where are you listening from, and what time is it for you. Now, let me tell you a story. I've always liked my neighborhood. Quiet, tucked away just outside a mid-sized town in Pennsylvania. Close enough to civilization to not feel isolated, but far enough out that you could still hear crickets at night and walk your dog without seeing a soul. I'd been living here for nearly 5 years, just me and my dog Lenny, a lazy old Labrador who preferred lying under the porch to chasing balls. It used to be farmland, I think, but it had been left alone for years. No one ever went back there. Occasionally I'd see deer moving through or hear coyotes yipping late at night, but for the most part it was just empty land. That is, until about 3 months ago when the new guy moved in. The house next to mine had been empty for a while after the previous owner, an elderly woman, passed away. Then, one Saturday, I noticed a U-Haul out front and some furniture being moved in. The guy was tall, lean, maybe late 40s. Long face, thin lips, moved kind of stiffly like he had joint pain or something. I waved to him from my porch, but he didn't wave back. Just looked at me, held my gaze a second too long, then turned and went back inside. I tried to give him the benefit of the doubt. Not everyone's friendly. Maybe he was just tired from moving, but something about him stuck with me, like he wasn't used to being watched, like a wild animal pretending to be human. The first time I really started to get uneasy was when I caught him staring over the fence. I was out back with Lenny one evening, just after dusk. I heard a branch snap and glanced toward the fence line. The new guy was standing there on the other side of my backyard fence, facing the woods. He wasn't doing anything, just standing perfectly still, arms at his sides, looking into the trees. I called out, "Evening," just to break the tension. He didn't respond. He turned slowly and looked at me. Again held eye contact, a second too long. Then he walked away, disappearing behind the tree line. I told myself it was weird, but not dangerous. Maybe he liked the woods. Maybe he was just a little off. A week later I saw the same thing. This time he was on my side of the fence. It was about 10 p.m. I'd let Lenny out for his final walk before bed. He ran to the far end of the yard and froze, tail stiff. That's when I saw him again, standing right next to my shed, halfway in the shadows. I flipped on the floodlight. Hey! He didn't flinch. Just walked backward, literally backward, until the trees swallowed him up again. I called the cops that night, but they just did a quick drive-by and told me to install some cameras. Probably just some guy who got turned around in the dark. I knew better. This wasn't someone who got lost. This was someone watching. After that, things escalated. Lenny started acting strange. He wouldn't go near the back door. He'd just sit there, growling softly, staring at the curtain. Then came the sounds, scratching at the walls at night, soft tapping on the windows, always at the same time, 2:13 a.m. It wasn't just noise. I started seeing things too. A shape outside the window, just a little too tall, too thin. A face peering in with eyes that didn't quite reflect light the right way. The camera I installed on the back porch, it picked up motion every night at exactly 2:13 a.m. but the footage would always glitch right before the movement came into frame. I started keeping a bat next to my bed. I tried talking to the guy once more in broad daylight. Saw him unloading groceries from his car and walked over. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual. "You been hearing weird things at night? I think we might have some kind of animal problem." He stared at me for a long moment, then said, "Not animals." Then he smiled. His teeth were too white, too perfect. That night, I dreamed of him standing at the foot of my bed, just standing there, breathing. Then I woke up and found muddy footprints on the floor leading from the back door to my room. Lenny refused to enter that room for days. I called the cops again, had them walk the property. They found nothing, no footprints, no signs of forced entry. One of the officers looked at me like I was losing my mind. So I started documenting everything, times, dates, videos. I even nailed my back windows shut and installed extra locks. Still, every night, 2:13 a.m., something tapped at the window. Always the same pattern, 3 short, 1 long. Then last week it all came to a head. Lenny went missing. I let him out around 10 like usual, turned away for a second to grab my phone, and when I turned back, he was gone. No barking, no sound, just gone. I searched for hours, called his name, walked the woods with a flashlight. Nothing. Then I noticed it. At the edge of the fence, carved into the wood, was that same tapping pattern. 3 short lines, 1 long, and next to it, fur. Lenny's fur. That night I didn't sleep. I sat in the living room with every light on, clutching the bat in my hands. At exactly 2:13 a.m., the power went out. No storm, no wind, just darkness. I sat there in the dark for a full minute, trying to slow my breathing. Then I heard the front door open. Not break, not creak. Open. I turned on my phone flashlight and shined it toward the hallway. And there he was. But it wasn't him. It had his shape, his face. But it wasn't right. The mouth stretched too wide. The eyes were sunken and glossy. The skin looked sagged, like it was trying to wear him, not be him. It smiled at me again, the exact same smile, the one with 2 perfect teeth. Then it whispered, "You've seen me now." I ran, out the back, through the woods. I didn't stop until I hit the main road. I've been staying in a motel since then. I told the cops. I showed them my footage. They humored me, said they'd look into it. But last night, the motel clerk said someone was asking for me. Left a note. It said, "I'll knock at 2:13. I'm not going back." I don't know what that thing was. I don't know what happened to John or if he was ever real. But if you live near the woods, if someone new moves in next door, and they never blink, and they smile too wide, get out. Don't wait. Don't wave. And whatever you do, don't open the door when you hear that knock. My name's Darren. I'm 43 years old, recently divorced, and I did what a lot of people in my situation do. I ran away from everything that reminded me of the life I used to have. That meant trading in my townhouse in Harrisburg for an aging moss-covered cabin beside an old lake in northwestern Pennsylvania, near the Allegheny National Forest. The place was cheap. Too cheap, honestly. When I asked the realtor why, she just gave me a vague smile and said it was far from town and quiet. That should have been a red flag. But at the time, quiet was exactly what I wanted. The lake didn't have an official name, at least not one I could find on any map. Locals just called it Stillwater. It stretched out wide and smooth, surrounded by dense pine and birch that leaned over the surface like they were whispering secrets into it. The water was black, not just dark, but black, inky, lightless, like it swallowed more than just sunlight. My first week there, I barely unpacked. I just drank coffee on the dock, sat in a creaky old canoe that came with the place, and stared at the water. There was something oddly hypnotic about it, calming, even. Like it listened, I didn't talk to many people. There weren't many around to begin with. Just a few cabins scattered around the lake's edge, some boarded up, some abandoned, one or two with fading signs of life. An older guy named Ron lived about a mile down the dirt road. Retired game warden. He was the only person who really talked to me. We chatted once by accident when I stopped him walking his dog near the trailhead. He glanced toward the water and said, "You fish?" "Not really," I said. "Never had the patience." He gave me a look. Might be best to leave that lake alone anyway. "Why's that?" Ron didn't answer. Just stared across Stillwater and said, "Sometimes people hear things out there. Sometimes they don't come back." I thought he was joking. Some old-timer trying to spook the new guy. But then his face didn't change. Not even a smirk. That night, I left a window open facing the lake, and that's the first time I heard it. It wasn't a sound I could explain. Not waves, not fish, not loons. It was singing. Faint, female, and old, like it came from underwater. A soft lullaby carried through the reeds and bouncing off the trees. I froze in bed, listening. It came in fragments, barely there, like I was only hearing it in my head. But then something else happened. Something knocked on the dock, 3 distinct thuds. Not the sound of waves, not branches, knocks, deliberate, heavy. Lenny, the golden retriever I'd adopted after the divorce, let out a low whine from his crate. He didn't bark, just curled into himself like he knew better. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped out onto the porch. The air was cold. The lake was motionless. Nothing on the dock. Nothing in the trees. Just stillness. I told myself it was a weird dream. Maybe the wind. Maybe I was more stressed than I thought. But the next morning I found something at the end of the dock. A shoe. A child's shoe. Small, muddy, old. The kind with Velcro straps, the kind you only ever see on kids under 10. I took it inside and called the local sheriff. He sent out a deputy who took a statement and left with the shoe, promising to check if it matches anything on file. But I never heard back, and the next night I heard the singing again. This time it was closer, clearer. Not a melody I recognized, no lyrics, just tone. Sad, like grief soaked into sound. And again the knock, ... 3 times. I didn't go outside that time. Just lay in bed, holding the covers tight, Lenny shaking beneath my arm. The next day I drove into town and found the local library. Spent 3 hours digging through old newspapers. Most of it was mundane lake fishing competitions, faded black and white photos of proud boys holding up bass. But then I found an article from 1987. 2 siblings disappear at Stillwater Lake, a brother and sister. Ages 7 and 10. They were staying at a cabin nearby with their grandparents. One night they snuck out, and they were never seen again. Search and rescue found footprints leading to the dock. But not away from it, I kept digging. Another disappearance. 1974. A teenage girl. Supposedly drowned, but they never found the body. 1995. A father and son out on a canoe. Canoe found upside, no bodies recovered. All from the same side of the lake. Mine. I drove back to the cabin with a pit in my gut. That night I didn't sleep. At 2:04 a.m., the singing returned. Only this time it wasn't just from the lake. It was in the walls, soft but close, like someone humming through wood. The house felt smaller, thicker, like the air didn't want to move. My flashlight flickered when I picked it up, and Lenny started pacing in tight circles, whining louder. Then something tapped the glass door to the porch. I turned and saw a hand, not pressed against the glass, but just hovering inches from it. Small, grayish blue, fingers long and too thin, nails dark like soaked wood. The flashlight died, and the hand vanished. I locked every window, every door. I nailed the damn bedroom shut and slept in the bathtub, Lenny curled against my legs. In the morning, I went to see Ron. He didn't act surprised. "I figured you'd be around sooner or later," he said. I told him everything. The singing, the hand, the newspaper clippings. He didn't laugh. Didn't tell me I was crazy. Instead, he poured us both a cup of coffee, sat down, and said, "They say the lake's always been hungry." I didn't say anything. Just let him talk. Long before settlers, the Lenape avoided it. Said something lived beneath, not a monster, not a creature. Something older, something that remembers. He sipped his coffee. Every few years, it takes someone. Doesn't matter who. Doesn't matter when. Some say it's just cursed. Some say there's a bargain to it. Feed it, and it leaves you alone. I asked him if he believed that. He looked at me for a long time and said, "I think there are places where the world's thin. And if you listen long enough, you'll hear what's beneath it." That night I didn't hear the singing. I heard footsteps, wet ones squishing against hardwood floors. I waited in bed, silent, clutching a hammer in both hands. Lenny growled, low and constant. Then the bedroom door creaked. I hadn't opened it. I'd nailed it shut, but it was open now. Standing in the doorway was a girl, maybe 7 years old, soaked from head to toe, hair stuck to her face, eyes glowing faintly blue like distant lanterns. She opened her mouth to speak, but all that came out was lake water. I don't remember much after that. When I woke up, it was morning. Sunlight poured through the window. Lenny was asleep on my chest. No water, no girl, no footprints. Just a faint sound of rippling outside. I packed my things that day. Paid someone to come haul the canoe off the dock. Told the realtor to sell the place. I didn't care for how much. Before I left, I walked to the end of the dock one last time. The lake was calm, flat as glass. At the bottom of the post, something had been carved into the wood, 3 names. I only recognized one. Darren. That was 3 weeks ago. Last night I was staying at a hotel in Pittsburgh. Woke up at 2:04 a.m. From the bathroom came the sound of someone humming, and when I looked at the mirror, written in condensation, were the words, "Stillwater doesn't forget." My name's Greg Turner, and I never really believed in bad land until the summer of 2022, when I took a job restoring a fire lookout tower in northern Washington. The area hadn't been used since the late 90s. Some backwoods parcel near Mount Baker. The place was only reachable by a TV and about a 2-hour ride through unmaintained forest access roads. I was paid by the state to hike in, document the damage, and if possible, begin minor repairs. I'd worked odd restoration contracts before, mostly backcountry cabins or weather stations. Nothing out of the ordinary. But this one was different. I knew it from the moment I saw the place. The tower was old, rusted, stained. The wood platform was warped with moisture and rot. Metal stairs twisted out like bones from a hillside. But it wasn't the tower that made me nervous. It was the silence. I'd never heard woods like that. No birds, no bugs, not even wind. I stood there for a good 10 minutes, just listening to nothing. And I'm not exaggerating, nothing. You could hear your own heartbeat in that kind of quiet. I unpacked my gear and set up inside. The old glass windows were so dusty you could barely see through them, but the tower gave a full 360 view of the woods. Every direction, trees. Not a house, not a road, not even a cleared trail. Just dense, unrelenting forest. By sundown, the whole world was a dark tangle. My solar radio caught nothing but static, and even my phone, which usually caught emergency bands this high up, showed 0 signal. I made a cold dinner, jotted a few notes about the structure, and tried to sleep. That night, I woke up to footsteps circling the base of the tower. I sat up in the cot, listening. The stairs creaked, one at a time, then stopped, then nothing. I waited, listened, then a voice, quiet, like a whisper through the cracks in the floorboards. "Greg?" I stood, my heart slamming in my chest. No one knew I was out here. The forest ranger who hired me had retired 2 years ago. I hadn't told a soul except the project coordinator. Then it came again, louder now. "Greg, it's okay. Come down." I looked out the window. Nothing but black forest. I didn't sleep that night. By morning, I'd convinced myself it was a dream. Maybe an echo in the wind, or my own name bouncing in my head after days of isolation. I spent the next day repairing a broken railing and writing measurements in my field book. I checked the stairs, found no prints. Nothing was disturbed. No signs of animals. No broken branches. Still, I felt watched. That night, the voice returned. This time it sounded like my brother. He died 6 years ago. "Greg, you forgot me." I curled up on the cot and stuffed my sleeping bag over my ears. The next morning I found a pair of muddy, bare footprints circling the base of the tower. I told myself it was a bear, or maybe a barefoot hiker. Hell, maybe a prank, but it wasn't. The footprints went in circles, tight, perfect circles around the base of the tower, then vanished. No lead-in, no trail, just gone. That was the last day I could pretend I was okay. By the fourth night, the voice didn't come from outside anymore. It came from inside the tower. Sometimes from beneath the cot, sometimes from the walls. "Greg, I'm still hungry. I was losing time. My watch stopped working." I'd go out to gather water and return to find it was pitch black, though it felt like mere minutes had passed. My food started disappearing, not all at once, just small things. Protein bars, a pack of jerky, one of my boots. I found it hanging in the tree the next morning, filled with dirt. The journal I'd been keeping had entries I didn't remember writing, words scrawled between pages, sentences that made no sense. She's inside the wall. I saw her smile. The stairs only go down now. Don't sleep at 3:17. The night of August 4th, I saw something in the woods, a shape. It didn't walk. It crawled fast, low, like it was dragging its limbs, pale arms that were too long, a head that didn't quite turn the right way. I tried to radio for help, but all I got was static, and then my own voice repeating back at me, "Greg, Greg, you forgot me." I locked the trapdoor that led to the stairs, nailed it shut. I stopped sleeping. Every time I closed my eyes, I dreamed of the forest rotting, the trees bleeding from their knots, the ground splitting open like skin, something huge moving beneath the dirt. On the seventh day, the sun didn't rise. I swear to God it just didn't. The sky went from black to dark gray, and back to black again. I looked at my watch. It blinked 3:17 a.m. over and over and over. That night I saw them. 3 figures crawling up the side of the tower, not using the stairs, just climbing the metal frame, pale hands, empty eyes, stretching up toward the glass windows. One of them was my brother, another looked like me. I smashed the lantern, hid in the shadows. They scratched at the glass for hours. One of them licked it. When they vanished at dawn, or what should have been dawn, I packed what I could and climbed down. I didn't care if I died in the woods. I had to get away from the tower, but something had changed. The forest wasn't the same. The trees were wrong. Not just twisted, but watching me. I found carvings in the trunks, dozens of them, faces, all identical. Eyes closed, mouths wide. Some of the carvings were weeping. I walked for hours, then days. Every time I thought I was going in a straight line, I'd end up back at the tower. But it was different now. Bigger, taller, rust-covered windows. But now there were faces behind the glass, dozens of them, pressed up, watching, smiling. I left my field journal in the woods, buried it beneath a rotting log. I hoped someone would find it and understand, but I don't think anyone will. I've been here for weeks now, maybe months. Time doesn't move the same anymore. The trees don't either. Last night I opened the trapdoor and climbed back into the tower. There was a fire burning in the stove. Something had cooked a meal, and the cot was warm. I think the tower missed me, and I think maybe It wants me to stay this time, forever. My name's Ellie Hartswell. I live in a rural patch of southern Ohio where the roads are dirt and the neighbors are too far to call out to. I work remote, I live alone, and I like it that way. At least I did. Until a few weeks ago when something started walking through my yard every night around 2:13 a.m. I wouldn't have noticed if it weren't for the motion-activated floodlights I had installed out back. They're sensitive. Usually it's just raccoons or a possum creeping by the trash bins. But starting about 3 weeks ago, they began going off at the exact same time, every night. Never earlier, never later. I didn't think much of it at first. Just an animal on a schedule, right? But then I checked the footage. The figure was human. At least I think it was tall, lean. The kind of lean that doesn't come from working out or skipping meals. It was just stretched, like someone had drawn a body wrong and let the limbs sag too long. It walked slowly through the yard, never turning its head, never acknowledging the lights. Straight across the grass, from the back tree line to the edge of my front porch. Then it disappeared. Every night, same path, same time. I didn't show anyone. Who would I even tell? The sheriff lives an hour out and barely responds to break-ins. The neighbors don't even have internet. Plus, the footage always looked a little degraded, glitchy, like the camera didn't want to record it clearly. Faces were blurred, limbs stuttered between frames. One night I decided I'd confront it. I stayed up, sat in the living room with the porch light off and my phone camera ready. 2:12 came. I watched the backyard window. At 2:13 exactly, the motion lights flared. The man was there. He didn't glance at the house, didn't break stride, just walked the same path. I pressed my face to the glass and held my breath. He had no eyes. Not in a socketless skull kind of way, more like the idea of eyes had never occurred to his face. Just smooth, pale skin where they should be, but he looked at me anyway. I felt it. A pulling sensation, like he'd reached inside me and touched something I didn't even know was there. Then he was gone. I checked the footage again. He didn't appear on it. But I saw something worse. I appeared on it, standing on the porch, eyes open. Not moving, just watching as he walked by. I swear, I never left the house. That's when the sleepwalking started. I'd wake up in the hallway, or by the back door. Once I found myself in the garage, barefoot, with the door wide open and mud on my feet. I started barricading the doors at night, keeping keys in a safe, locking the fridge. I was scared I'd leave and not come back. 2 days later, my neighbor Joan, the only one within walking distance, knocked on my door with a concerned look. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Saw your porch light flickering all night." "I didn't turn it on," I said honestly. Joan looked uncomfortable. "Well, I thought I saw you out there, just standing for hours." I tried to laugh it off. That night, I set up a second camera inside, facing the front door. When I checked the footage in the morning, I saw myself walk to the door at 2:11 a.m., unlock the deadbolt, open it wide, and stand there waiting. He never came inside, but I think he didn't have to, because ever since that night, something's been off. It's the small things. I'll find dirty dishes I didn't use, clothes laid out I never wore. I'll glance at the mirror and see myself blink just a fraction of a second too late, or not at all. Sometimes I'll wake up and all the clocks say 2:13, even if it's midday. One afternoon I came home from a supply run and found muddy footprints leading from the basement to the kitchen. When I checked the basement, there was something there, not a person, a shape. A silhouette burned into the wall like a shadow had been trapped in paint, arms too long, head cocked like it was listening. When I turned the light on, it vanished. The same night I got a knock at the door, a polite knock, gentle, rhythmic. I didn't answer. The next day the knock came again. Same time, 2:13 p.m., this time in broad daylight. I looked through the peephole. No one there. But on the other side of the glass, fogged with breath, someone had written, "I am already inside." I called the sheriff. He came, looked around, saw nothing, blamed it on stress. But before he left, he turned to me and said, "You know that old place down the hill? 3 people went missing there in the 70s, just gone, no signs of forced entry, no break-ins. Their neighbors all said the same thing. They'd seen someone walking through the yard at night." I didn't sleep for 2 days. Then I got a call from my own number. I let it go to voicemail. The message was 10 minutes of static, but underneath it I could hear something breathing, slow, deliberate. Then, very faintly, "I am you now. I don't leave the house anymore. I barely sleep. I've covered all the mirrors. I smashed the security cameras. But even now I swear I catch glimpses of myself out of the corner of my eye, standing at the window, smiling. Last night I looked out and saw the man again. Only this time he stopped halfway across the yard, lifted his head, and waved. When I backed away from the window, I heard footsteps upstairs, but I live alone. We moved to the farmhouse in late August, right as the fields behind it were beginning to change color, no longer green, not yet gold. It was my wife's dream, not mine. A fixer-upper, she said. A peaceful place to start over. Somewhere quiet where the air didn't taste like exhaust fumes and we could sleep with the windows open. I wasn't used to it at first. The way the nights out here didn't hum with the low throb of traffic or city noise. The stillness was absolute, like a pause that never resumed. We had 3 acres, but our property backed up to a much larger stretch of farmland, separated by nothing but a line of old wooden fence posts and brittle wire that had probably been there for 50 years. Beyond it, an open harvest field stretched out into the distance. The owner lived a mile or so down the dirt road. I never saw him. His name was Benjamin Hart, according to the mailbox. My wife, Lacey, loved it. Every morning she'd step outside barefoot with her tea, watch the fog roll low across the field, and smile like it was some kind of dreamscape. She painted in the barn while I worked remotely from the office upstairs. It wasn't bad. I started to relax into it. Until the second week of September, It started with a light, just one at first. It flickered in the middle of the field around 2:00 a.m. I saw it from the upstairs window while closing my laptop. It looked like someone holding a lantern, standing completely still, a few hundred yards from the fence. At first I thought it was Hart checking on his crops, but the light didn't move. It just hovered, flickered, then faded out like it had been snuffed. I didn't mention it to Lacey. I didn't want to freak her out. But the next night I saw it again, same spot, same time. And the night after that, there were 2 of them. I stopped sleeping well. I told myself it was harvest equipment, maybe an old generator rig. But it didn't sit right. These lights didn't behave like anything I knew. They pulsed like breathing, like they were alive. On the 4th night, I decided to get a closer look. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped out onto the back porch. Lacey was asleep, thankfully. The night was cool and brittle, the kind of cold that didn't feel natural for the time of year. I crossed our backyard slowly and stepped up to the wire fence. There were 3 lights now arranged in a triangle. One of them flickered toward me, not randomly, deliberately, like it saw me, like it was testing me. Then, all at once, the 3 lights blinked out, and I heard something move in the corn. I didn't see what it was. Just the sound of something large shifting through dry stalks, steady, unhurried. I went back inside and locked every door in the house. The next morning I asked Lacey if she'd ever seen anything strange out in the field. She just laughed and said no. Why? Did you see a UFO or something? I didn't press it. But later that day, I walked the fence line. The ground on our side was dusty and undisturbed. But about 15 feet into the farmer's field, I saw something. A circular depression in the soil flat, like something heavy had stood there. No tire marks, no footprints. Just one perfectly round indentation, maybe 10 feet wide. That night I stayed up again. I don't know why. I felt like I was being tested, like if I kept watching, I might understand. At 2:13 a.m., 4 lights appeared. This time I didn't just watch. I recorded it. The footage showed the lights clearly, but when I looked back at it, something strange happened. The lights would glitch the frame. The video would smear like static, and for a fraction of a second, the shape of something enormous loomed between the lights, tall, thin-limbed. Wrong. I paused the frame, squinted at the screen, and my stomach dropped. It had too many joints. Its arms bent the wrong way. Its head was tilted at an impossible angle. And then the video crashed. The lights didn't show up the following night. Instead, I heard someone knock on the back door. It was 2:17 a.m. I grabbed the baseball bat I kept by the bed and crept downstairs. The porch light was already on, casting a faint halo across the deck. The knocking stopped. I approached the door slowly, my heart hammering, and looked out the peephole. No one was there, but the lights were back in the field. Closer this time, right behind the fence. The following day, I visited the old general store down the road and asked the clerk about Benjamin Hart. She hesitated, then leaned in. "Ben doesn't tend that land anymore," she said. "His son went missing 5 years ago, out in that field, just vanished. After that, he left town. No one's heard from him since." I asked if they ever found the boy. No, she said, but Ben claimed he saw lights in the field the night it happened. That night I begged Lacey to let us leave. I told her something was wrong with the land, that I'd seen things, heard things. She didn't believe me. She thought I was having a breakdown. Too much stress, too many late nights. She made me promise to sleep. Just one good night, she said, please. So I took something to help me sleep. I locked all the doors. I even unplugged the cameras. And I slept. For the first time in weeks, when I woke up, the back door was open. Lacey was gone. Her teacup still sat on the porch rail. Her shoes were beside the door. The wind had blown her canvas off the easel in the barn, revealing a painting underneath that she hadn't shown me yet. It was the field at night. The lights were there, but in the middle of them stood something tall and spindly, holding out a hand. And in that hand was a figure, a woman, barefoot, her head tilted to the side. The police searched the field. They found her footprints. They found the same circle in the soil, but no sign of Lacey. No one believed me, of course. I told them everything. The lights, the knocking, the video, they took my computer. Found nothing but a corrupted file and blurry images. They wrote it off as a tragic accident. The case was closed. I stayed at a motel for a while, then moved away. I haven't been back to Idaho since. But sometimes around 2 a.m., when the world is too quiet and the air feels just a bit too still, I swear I see it again. A flicker of light. Out beyond the trees, still breathing, still watching, still waiting. You ever hear something in the woods that doesn't sound wrong, but feels wrong? That's how this started. I've worked as a wilderness safety officer in Pisgah National Forest for over 6 years now. If you're not familiar, it's in western North Carolina. Dense Appalachian forest, rolling green ridges, caves, creeks that seem to whisper. We get a lot of hikers, but every now and then people go missing. Usually it's heat stroke or a fall or just someone getting turned around too far off trail. Usually. A week ago, 3 college students from Raleigh went missing along the Cold Ridge Loop. They'd checked in at the ranger station and planned to hike the entire trail over 3 days. They never made it to their car. Their names were Tyler, Jess, and Morgan. I spent 4 days with search teams sweeping that area. On day 3, we found their tent at a primitive campsite about 10 miles in. It had been torn apart, not by an animal, ripped open from the inside, like they were trying to get away from something. The weird part? Their bags and gear were still there, along with their phones, wallets, even the camp stove, untouched. But the fire pit was strange. Someone had lined it with stones carved with crude, spiraling symbols. Not the kind of stuff you buy from Ree. We didn't find blood. No signs of a struggle. No footprints leading away. Just 3 sleeping bags neatly unzipped, and that circle of stones. That night I volunteered to stay behind alone to monitor the area. I told myself it was to make sure no scavengers or gear thieves showed up, but I think I just didn't like the idea of that camp sitting there, waiting in the dark, completely alone. I set up my own tent about 20 feet away. Around midnight, I heard the first whisper. Not words, not even a voice, really, just this rhythmic hush moving through the trees, like breath through dead leaves. I thought it was wind, until I realized the trees weren't moving. The forest was still. It sounded again, closer. I stepped out with my flashlight, scanned the camp, what everything was as I left it, until I saw the sleeping bags. All 3 had been zipped back up. I didn't touch them. I didn't want to. I stayed awake until dawn, then called it in. The other rangers thought I was sleep-deprived, maybe a little spooked. I let them think that later that day we found Jess, or what was left of her. She was in a dry creek bed about 2 miles off trail, curled up in a fetal position. No shoes, no shirt, eyes wide open. Her mouth had been filled with dirt and moss, like someone had stuffed it there by hand. Her hands were folded over her chest, holding a bundle of twigs shaped like a figure 8. There wasn't a scratch on her. Morgan and Tyler were still missing, and nobody wanted to say it, but everyone was thinking the same thing. This wasn't just a lost hiker situation anymore. Something was very wrong. I took the next 2 days off. I told them I needed rest, but really I needed to go back. Not with a search party, just me. I needed to find that creek bed again. I don't know why. Maybe I thought I'd find a clue the others missed. Maybe I was already losing it. It was late afternoon when I got there. The leaves were heavy with moisture, and the air smelled like wet copper. I followed the dry stream deeper than before, and that's when I saw it. A tree, enormous, old beyond reason. It sat at the base of a slope, half its roots exposed, tangled like fingers clawing through the earth. And in the center of those roots, something was buried. I didn't dig it out. I didn't need to. The earth had already been disturbed, and something dark stuck out, leather maybe, or old cloth, covered in strange white carvings, almost like bone. But the moment I reached for it, I heard that sound again, the whisper. Only this time it was inside me. I dropped to my knees, clutching my head, because it wasn't just noise anymore. It was memory, but not mine, a woman's voice, sobbing, a hand reaching into fire. Children laughing, then screaming. A man with eyes sewn shut, whispering through his teeth. And above it all, a wordless feeling, a desire to feed, to be filled, to be remade. I blacked out. When I came to, it was dusk. My hands were covered in dirt, my nails caked with it. I had dug something out, and it was gone. I stumbled back to my truck. That night I dreamed of standing beneath that tree, eyes full of dirt, mouth open wide, swallowing roots like veins. The whisper in my ear said, "You brought it home." I didn't go into work the next day, or the one after that. I tried to sleep, tried to forget, but every time I close my eyes, I'm back at that tree. I feel the soil in my throat, feel the something I let out walking the woods behind my house. I haven't told anyone, not really, because I don't think it matters anymore. You see, this morning I found Morgan. She was on my porch, naked, eyes open, not blinking. She smiled when I opened the door and placed something in my hand. It was a twig doll, another figure 8. Then she walked into the woods. She didn't speak, but the whisper inside me did. It said I'll understand soon, said I've been chosen, said I dug it out, so now it's mine to carry. I don't know what I freed, but it's in me now, and I'm afraid that I'm not going to be the last. I don't usually talk about this. Most folks who work in remote areas, rangers, wardens, fire lookouts, we see things. We hear things. We shrug it off. You have to, or it'll eat at you until there's nothing left but fear and questions. But I can't shrug this one off, because I still don't know if I made it out. My name's Will Harper. I was a field ranger in the Wichita Mountains Wildlife Refuge in southwest Oklahoma. Rocky terrain, big sky, buffalo, and valleys that look like God carved them out with his knuckles. I spent most of my time alone, checking trail cams, logging wildlife behavior, and keeping the campers from lighting fires where they shouldn't. We'd had 3 disappearances over the last 6 years, people who wandered off and just never came back. But last spring, one of our own vanished, Ranger Elaine Marsh. She'd gone out to investigate a report of a landslide near a remote section of the Elk Trail, one that skirts the base of a series of tall, jagged formations we call the Singing Stones. Nobody calls them that officially, but if you're out there long enough, you'll hear them hum at dusk. Elaine never radioed back. By the time we got a team out there, all we found was her truck still running. Her ranger pack was in the passenger seat. GPS, first aid kit, radio, all untouched. The driver's side door was wide open. Keys still in the ignition. No tracks, no blood, just silence. I volunteered to search that area every day for the next week. Something about the case haunted me. Elaine was sharp. She'd been a backcountry climber. She wouldn't have slipped, wouldn't have wandered off trail. Something had called her out there. On the 4th day of searching, I found something. It was a narrow passage between 2 stones. I must have passed it a dozen times and never noticed it, because the entrance was nearly sealed. But something had recently shifted, like the earth breathed and this thing exhaled. I squeezed through, just enough room to slip sideways between the rock faces. I came out into a natural chamber, open to the sky above. It looked like an ancient well, circular, walled by towering stone. In the center was a low pedestal made of stacked rock, and on that pedestal was Elaine's badge. Just the badge, polished, clean. My first thought was, this was a joke. Someone found her badge and set this up as a trap or a warning. But who would have done that? No prints, no signs of wildlife. And more than that, no sound. The entire chamber was dead quiet. No wind, no birds. Not even my own breathing, like the place swallowed noise. I reached out and picked up her badge, and I shouldn't have done that. The air changed, not colder, not exactly, but heavier, and I started to feel wrong. It's hard to explain. You ever been in a moment where reality flickers? Where the world feels slightly off, like you're standing on the wrong side of a mirror? That's what it felt like. I dropped the badge and stumbled back. But when I turned around to leave, the opening between the stones was gone. It was still there, sort of, but not open. The gap had closed, as if the rock had slid an inch to the left. I pressed my hands against it, solid, no give. I wasn't panicking yet. I should have been, but I just stood there, because I could feel something behind me. Not a presence, a pattern. The pedestal was humming, or maybe the stone beneath it was. A deep resonance I felt in my molars more than my ears. I turned back and saw something new scratched into the stone above the pedestal, a spiral like a fingerprint, still wet. I don't remember falling asleep, but I must have, because I woke up lying on my back outside the stones as the sun came up. My watch said 6:13 a.m., but I had checked it just after noon before going in. I lost nearly 18 hours, and my left hand was burned, just a faint spiral scar across the palm. I called it in. Said I'd fallen, concussed myself. Lead, basically. The paramedic who checked me out said my blood pressure was through the roof, and my eyes weren't tracking right. I was cleared for light duty, but everything since then has been off. The dream started 2 nights later. I'd be back in that stone chamber, but the pedestal was taller each time, and there was someone standing behind it, not moving, just watching. A woman, short hair, narrow shoulders, ranger uniform, but no face. I couldn't scream, couldn't move, could only watch as she stepped forward and lifted something in her hands. My own face. That's when I'd wake up soaked in sweat, sometimes bleeding from my nose. I tried to go back to the site, but I could never find it again. It was like the rocks shifted again, hiding it, like it only opened when it wanted to. One morning, about a week later, I woke up before dawn, standing on the edge of the rocks, still in my bedclothes. No memory of driving there, no memory of waking, no memory at all. That's when I stopped sleeping. I filed for medical leave, saying I needed time off. Truth is, I was afraid of what I'd find myself doing next. I started seeing reflections of myself that weren't quite right, in the side mirror of my truck, in the kitchen window. The me staring back would blink just a half second too slow, would tilt his head when I didn't, would smile when I was trying not to. It's not that I think something followed me out. It's that I think I never left. I think part of me is still in that chamber, dreaming all this. Or worse, I walked out, but something else came back in my place. The spiral on my hand hasn't faded. It's darker now, almost black, and sometimes when I look at it too long, it moves. Not visually, but in my mind. It wants to go deeper, wants me to open it, let something through. Last night I saw Elaine again, not in a dream. I was walking down my hallway to the kitchen when she stepped into view from the guest room. Same uniform, same quiet stare, same badge I picked up, only her face wasn't blank anymore. It was mine, smiling. I backed away, slammed the door, didn't sleep. It's quiet now. I don't know how much longer I can resist it. The spiral is humming, and I think I can hear the stones calling again, calling me back. My name is Nathan Cole. I used to think I was the kind of guy who could handle anything. I spent most of my life as a structural engineer in Vermont, calm, quiet, predictable. My wife Danielle and I used to go up to a small rental cabin once a year near West Hollow Ridge, just south of Groton State. It was our retreat, peaceful, remote, no cell service, no internet, just tall pines, the sound of loons echoing over the nearby lake and each other. Danielle died 2 years ago. Brain aneurysm. No warning. Just gone. After that, I never went back to West Hollow. I couldn't bring myself to, but this year I did. I don't know why. Maybe I thought if I went back alone, I'd feel her there somehow. Maybe I thought the memories would comfort me. Or maybe I was just tired of feeling like a ghost in my own house. The cabin hadn't changed. The same creaky porch, the same rusted lantern nailed to the siding. But something felt off the moment I got out of my truck. The wind didn't sound right through the trees. Like it wasn't passing through, it was circling. I chalked it up to nerves. Brought in my bags, stocked the fridge, lit the fireplace. That first night I sat on the old wicker chair out back, looking at the stars and sipping whiskey. I whispered to Danielle like a lunatic. That's when I heard it. A single, sharp knock from the woods. I froze. It wasn't an animal sound. It wasn't wind. It sounded like someone knocking on wood, somewhere deep in the trees. I stood up, flashlight in hand, and swept the beam toward the source. Just trees, silent, still. I muttered something to myself and went back inside. Chalked it up to an echo or a branch falling. The next morning I found footprints in the soft earth just behind the cabin. Barefoot, human, but they weren't mine. They were too long. The toes were spread wide, almost animal-like, and there were drag marks behind them, like whoever made them had trouble lifting their feet. I followed them for maybe 30 feet before they disappeared into the undergrowth. I should have left then, but I didn't. That afternoon I hiked down to the lake like Danielle and I used to. There's a narrow path that winds along a ravine, and you have to cross a small wooden bridge to get to the shore. The bridge was gone. Not collapsed, gone, ripped clean from its posts. The wood splintered as if something had torn it out. I turned around immediately. On the way back I found more footprints, again barefoot, again dragging, but this time there were 2 sets, one larger, one smaller. That night the knocking came again, louder, closer. I didn't sit outside this time. I sat inside the cabin with the lights off and my back against the wall, holding a knife like it would actually matter. The knocks didn't stop. They circled the cabin, not footsteps, just knocking. Every 20 seconds or so, tap, then silence, then tap again from a different angle. Around 3:00 a.m., it stopped, just like that. In the morning, I found the front door wide open. I don't remember opening it. I lock it every night out of habit. Always have. I checked the floorboards. Dirt tracked inside. And something else, damp pine needles and moss, arranged in the shape of a spiral. A perfect spiral. I stepped back. I don't know why, but something about it made my chest seize up. I swept it away with a broom and scrubbed the floor clean. I should have left then, but I didn't. Instead, I drove 30 miles to the nearest town, Marshfield, and asked around. Most folks shrugged, but one man, an old trapper named Elijah, went pale when I mentioned West Hollow Ridge. "You're up by the old Moore's property, ain't you?" he asked. I nodded. "Should have burned that place down a long time ago," he muttered. "They called it a cabin. It was never a cabin." "What do you mean?" "They kept something there," he said. "Not a person. Not really. Thing that used to be one. They say he was the first to disappear into the woods and come back wrong. Wouldn't speak. Wouldn't eat. Just scratched spirals into the dirt. I didn't sleep that night. The spiral was back by morning, on the inside of my bedroom window, not drawn, scratched into the glass. I hadn't heard a thing. The next 3 days passed in a blur. At night I'd hear the knocking again, sometimes on the walls, sometimes from under the floorboards. Once, I swear I saw a figure outside the cabin just beyond the tree line. It looked tall, impossibly thin, head cocked at an angle that made my neck hurt just to see it. But the worst was the dream. I dreamt of Danielle. She was standing in the woods, barefoot, hair hanging wet over her shoulders, like she'd just climbed out of the lake. She was smiling, but it wasn't her smile. It was too wide, too still. She opened her mouth and whispered something I couldn't understand. Then I woke up, drenched in sweat, the spiral carved into the wood floor beside my bed. By the 5th day, I knew I couldn't stay. I packed everything, loaded the truck, and tried to start the engine. Nothing. Battery dead. That made no sense. I'd just driven it into town the day before. I tried calling for help. No signal. I was stuck. That night I didn't sleep. I sat in the corner of the living room, flashlight in hand, waiting. At 2:17 a.m., the knocking started again, but this time it didn't move. It came from beneath me, directly under the floor. Then the boards began to creak, slowly, one by one. Like something was crawling through the crawl space, dragging itself inch by inch toward me. I didn't move. The boards warped slightly beneath the center rug. I didn't breathe. Then the rug began to rise, just a little, just enough for me to see the tip of something pale pushing up from the cracks. A hand, long fingers, no nails, no wrinkles, just smooth, wet flesh. The fingers tapped once, then again. I ran out the door, into the trees. I didn't stop. I didn't care where I went. I ran for what felt like hours. The forest seemed endless, shifting behind me, every path turning me back toward that cabin. Then I saw the lake, and I saw her, Danielle, standing on the shore, barefoot, eyes hollow. "Come home," she said. I turned and ran the other way, screaming until my throat went raw. Somehow I found the road. Somehow someone picked me up. A ranger. I don't remember what I told him. I just remember sobbing, shaking, begging not to go back. They found the cabin empty. No signs of forced entry. Nothing unusual, they said. No footprints. No spirals. No handprints. My truck started just fine once they boosted the battery. I never went back. I moved across the country. I changed my number. I sleep with the lights on. I keep a camera pointed at every door. But sometimes I still hear it. A knock, one knock, always at 2:17 a.m., always from beneath the floor. My name's Carter Vance. I've worked for the U.S. Forest Service for going on 14 years now. Most of that time I've been stationed in the San Juan Mountains of southwestern Colorado. If you're not familiar, it's some of the most stunning wilderness in the lower 48 jagged peaks, narrow switchbacks, and old mining roads that crumble if you even look at them wrong. It's beautiful country, but unforgiving, especially once you leave the marked trails. This story took place in the early fall of 2021. I'd just transferred to a small ranger outpost near Silverton, Colorado. It's an old mining town turned seasonal tourist destination. Off-season, it's quiet, too quiet. That's why I liked it. The first few weeks were uneventful. Standard patrols, weather monitoring, a handful of lost hikers who didn't understand that intermediate still means elevation gain. Nothing I hadn't handled before. But then I got a call from dispatch about a lone backcountry permit holder who hadn't checked in. His name was Micah Abrams, early 30s, experience with high-altitude hiking. According to the permit, he'd planned to do a solo loop through the Ice Lakes Basin and then cut across some old mining trails east of there. He should have been back 2 days ago. Normally, search and rescue would wait a full 72 hours unless there was a sign of distress, but his family had called twice, said they hadn't heard a word since he left. Something about that made the hair on my arms stand up, so I geared up and decided to check the route myself. I left just after sunrise, hiked past the alpine lakes, and kept following his marked trail. The temperature had dropped noticeably since the day before. That can happen fast at 12,000 feet, but still it felt unnatural, like something was breathing cold into the trees. About 6 miles in, I found the remnants of Micah's camp. It looked off. His tent was still zipped, but flattened like it had collapsed inward. A campfire sat cold and unused, and his bear canister was still full, unopened. That alone was weird, but what stopped me dead was his journal. It was tucked under a rock beside the fire pit, half soaked in morning dew. I flipped through the pages. Most of it was ordinary trip notes, descriptions of the landscape, a few sketches, but the last entry made my blood run cold. Heard something last night. Sounded like chains dragging across the rocks. Thought it was wind until it whispered my name. I scanned the area around me. I was alone. No tracks but mine, no rustling in the pines. Still, the weight in the air had shifted. It felt like the forest had gone still to listen. I pressed forward, following the route Micah had outlined. A few hours later, I spotted the mouth of an old mine shaft about half a mile off the trail. It wasn't marked on any of my maps. That happens more often than you'd think, especially out here where dozens of prospectors dug holes in every direction. But this one, something about it made me pause. The boards covering the entrance had been torn away, not collapsed, ripped. I don't know why I went inside. Curiosity, maybe. Duty, probably both. I flicked on my headlamp and stepped into the mine. The air inside was freezing, and not in the cold rock kind of way. It was wet, damp, like breathing through soaked wool. My boots crunched over broken stone and old timbers. About 30 feet in, I found Micah's pack. It had been torn open, not slashed like by a bear, but unraveled, threads hanging, zippers peeled back like fingers. I called out for him, Micah, The mine answered with a hollow echo. I pressed on. That's when I saw the scratches on the walls, long, thin gouges that dragged from the ceiling to the floor, like claws. They crisscrossed over each other, sometimes spiraling inward like something had been spinning. The deeper I went, the more of them I saw. And then I smelled it. Wet iron, blood. I rounded a corner and nearly tripped over him. Micah was slumped against the far wall of a chamber maybe 10 feet wide. His eyes were open but glassy, fixed on the ceiling. His hands were torn to the bone, fingers bent backward. His mouth was stretched wide like he'd died screaming. But there wasn't a scratch on his face. I radioed it in, my voice barely steady. Told them I found the body. I was preparing to drag it out when I noticed something behind him. Symbols carved into the wall. Circles within circles, jagged triangles, and something like a twisted stick figure with too many limbs. And in the middle, fresh blood. Micah's blood, that's when I heard it. A rattle, slow and deliberate. I turned around, raising my headlamp. The beam shook wildly, bouncing off jagged walls. The rattle stopped, then came the whisper. It was my name, not spoken. Exhaled. Carter. I ran. No dignity, no protocol. Just panic. I bolted through the tunnel, light swinging wildly. I don't know how I didn't fall or crack my head open. I heard it chasing me, something dragging, slithering, its breath thick and wet. I burst out of the mine into daylight and silence. Nothing followed. I collapsed just outside the entrance, gasping, heart hammering. Back at the station, I filed the report. I didn't mention the whisper. I didn't mention the symbols. Just logged the facts. Found Micah, deceased from exposure and trauma. Recovered the body. Case closed. But I didn't sleep that night, or the night after, because something followed me out of that mine. At first, I thought it was stress. I started hearing things, scraping sounds at night, the rattle of old chains. My name whispered in dreams. I moved out of the ranger station and into a motel in town. Still didn't help. Then came the frost. Middle of September, and I woke one morning to find my windows iced over inside. My boots were frozen to the floorboards. I opened the door to the hallway and found a trail of damp footprints, bare, human-shaped, but far too long. I took a leave of absence, told my supervisor I needed time. I moved back to Denver. The dreams kept coming. I don't know what I brought back with me. All I know is that whatever it is, it hasn't left, and I don't think it ever will. You ever spend a night in the Okefenokee? I don't mean the edge of it, where the tourists go on their little boat rides and see gators sunning on the banks. I'm talking about deep in it, past Billy's Island, past Chesser Island, where the trees start leaning like they're hiding something, and the water goes black even when the sky's blue. That's where I worked. 27 years as a wilderness officer out there. Most of the time it was just me and the swamp, and I was good with that. I liked the quiet. After the war and everything that came after, I didn't want to hear much else. But in 2004, something changed. Something woke up. I don't talk about it much. Most people wouldn't believe it. But I've kept the journal entries, and I still dream about that week. Not like a memory, like a warning. Let me tell you what happened. October 3rd, 2004. It started with a call from the ranger station. Couple of volunteer researchers went missing near Cowhouse Island. Not unusual in itself, people underestimate the swamp all the time. It can swallow a man whole if he gets cocky. But what worried me was the tracker we sent out after them. He hadn't checked in either. 3 people vanished, no calls, no distress signals, and no storms to blame it on, so they asked me to go look. Said I knew the area better than anyone. They were right. I left the next morning, took my flat-bottomed skiff down the Sewanee Canal, and turned west toward Cowhouse. It was quiet. Still, even the birds were keeping their mouths shut. That always means something out there. I got to the island by late afternoon. Found their camp 2 empty, 2 tents, both zipped. Fire half burned down, food still in the pan. And the tracker's gear was there too, his sat phone untouched. The hairs on my arm stood up the moment I saw that. I called in the scene, marked a location, and decided to spend the night. Figured maybe they went hiking inland and got turned around. Happens, but I wanted to be there if they wandered back in the dark. October 4th. They didn't. Instead, I woke up just past 2 a.m. to the sound of someone wading through the water. I stayed quiet, listening. Thought maybe one of the missing had found their way back. But the splashing stopped about 20 yards from camp, and then I saw a light. At first, I thought it was a flashlight, just a pale white glow floating between the trees, but it moved too smoothly. No bobbing, no flickering. I called out, "Hello, you injured?" The light didn't respond. I grabbed my rifle and flashlight and followed it. I know. Don't follow lights in the swamp. I was raised on those warnings too, but this felt different, like it wanted me to follow. Not malicious, just needy. The light led me maybe half a mile in. Then it stopped right over a patch of open water. That's when I saw what was underneath it. A body. Face up, eyes wide, mouth still open like he'd died screaming. One of the researchers. I didn't recognize him at first. The skin was bloated, pale, like he'd been under a week. But he'd only been missing 2 days. I turned to get back to camp, and that's when I realized I couldn't see my light anymore. I spun around. Nothing but black trees, moss, and the quiet sound of bubbles rising in the water behind me. Something was down there, moving. I ran. I didn't stop until I saw the dim orange glow of my campfire again. And even then I didn't sleep. October 5th. Next morning I went back with rope and tarp to recover the body. It was gone, no drag marks, no bloating debris. Just empty water, like it had never been there. I marked the spot, left a buoy, and called it in again. HQ told me to hold my position. Help was on the way. But I knew that could take hours. So I did something stupid. I went deeper. I followed the direction the light had led me from. Kept checking my compass every few minutes. It worked fine until it didn't. About 6 miles in, it spun like a broken clock. That's when I found the second body. It was the tracker. He was lashed to a tree with reeds. Hands bound, mouth stuffed with moss, eyes gouged out, chest torn open. No animal did that. and it damn sure wasn't human. I threw up, dropped to my knees, and emptied everything I'd eaten that morning. Then I heard it. The light. It was back, but this time it was red, floating above the water, maybe 30 feet ahead. I pointed my rifle at it, and it didn't flinch. Then I heard the whisper. Jackson, it was my name. Not shouted, not growled, said, soft and clear, and from my wife's voice. My wife's been dead since '98, cancer. That voice made my knees buckle. Jackson, help me. I did the only thing I could. I ran again. October 6th. I tried leaving the swamp that morning, got in my skiff and pushed east toward the canal, but the water levels had risen. Trees blocked the channel that had been open 2 days before. GPS stopped working. Compass still spun. I paddled in circles for 6 hours before I ended up right back at the abandoned camp. But something had changed. There were now 3 tents. I didn't set up a third. The last entry read, "Don't follow the light. It's not trying to help, it's trying to learn your name." I don't remember sleeping that night. Just pacing around the camp, waiting for the sunrise, clutching my rifle so tight my knuckles turned white. But the sun never came. It was just fog, thick, yellowish, like it was made of ash. I couldn't see 10 feet past my boots. That's when the whispering started again. All around me, my name, my wife's name, voices from old ranger buddies who died years ago, all of them calling me. I nearly stepped into the water before I caught myself. There were dozens of lights, all red now, drifting just above the surface, waiting. I never told HQ the full truth. I said I found one body, marked the site, and got disoriented during recovery. No one asked questions. The official reports list the other 2 as still missing. But I know better. That swamp doesn't just lose people. It keeps them. I've never gone back. I moved north, took a job in the Blue Ridge. But sometimes I'll wake up from a dead sleep and swear I hear my name, whispered, soft, familiar, and red light glowing just beyond the trees. My name is Cole Granger, and I've been a park ranger for over a decade. Most of that time was spent in the flatlands of Kansas, patrolling stretches of tallgrass prairie and keeping drunk campers from burning the place down. It was peaceful work, quiet, but 2 years ago I transferred up north to Washington State, to a remote outpost tucked along the far edge of the Okanogan-Wenatchee National Forest. The locals call the area Bearjaw Ridge. Most maps won't show the name. It's buried in the northeastern stretch of the park, just miles from the Canadian border, and for decades it was considered off-limits. Too dangerous, too isolated. But when the Forest Service got new funding and decided to reopen neglected wilderness, guess who got put on the reassignment list? Me. I didn't mind at first. The thought of being alone up in the Cascades sounded like a damn dream after a bitter divorce and years of bureaucratic red tape. They built a new ranger cabin near the old trailhead and told me I'd be the only permanent officer posted there. Just me, the trees, and the ridge. The first few months were uneventful. Some minor trail clearing, a few black bear sightings, some hikers who didn't know their limits, but nothing out of the ordinary. Nothing to justify the long-standing rumors I'd started to hear from the surrounding towns. They called it cursed land. Locals wouldn't go near it. Old-timers talked about entire families disappearing up there. Fires that started without a cause. Hikers who walked in and came out days later with no memory of where they'd been. And always, the phrase that came up most? The ground's wrong on Beer Jaw. I used to laugh it off. Forest superstition, the usual cryptid talk. But I stopped laughing one night last October. It was the start of the fall stretch. Nights were getting colder. The trees had just started to turn, lighting the valley in reds and golds that made the place look like a Bob Ross painting. I was sitting in the tower cabin with the fire going, sipping weak coffee and flipping through old forestry records. That's when I heard the radio crackle. It wasn't a voice. Not at first, just static. But then it clicked, a short, staccato burst of sound almost like Morse code. Then silence. I tried responding. "This is Ranger Station, Beer Jaw. Come back?" Nothing. But when I set the radio down, I heard something else outside. A low droning sound, like wind, but not quite. It had a rhythm, almost like a growl, stretched out and steady. I stepped out onto the porch with my flashlight and swept the woods. The noise stopped. Everything was quiet, until I turned around and saw a shape standing at the edge of the tree line about 30 yards away. Not moving, not saying a word, just watching. At first I thought it was a bear, but it was upright, too tall for a person. No flashlight, no gear, just long, bent legs and a body shaped wrong, like someone had been put through a taffy puller and forgotten how to be human halfway through. I blinked and it was gone. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning I hiked down to the tree line where I'd seen it. Nothing but churned leaves, no prints, no scat. Just a strange gouge and a nearby pine tree 5 long scratches carved at shoulder height, like something testing its claws. I filed a report, and HQ told me it was probably a cougar. I know what cougars look like. That wasn't a damn cougar. The next week a pair of hikers went missing. They'd signed in at the old lodge. Names were Hannah and Lucas, early 30s, from Spokane. Left around noon on a Friday, headed up to Beer Jaw Trail. They never signed out. Didn't return Saturday. Didn't call home. By Sunday morning, I was organizing a search. We started with their car, still parked where they left it. No signs of foul play, no damage. Just 2 backpacks in the back seat and a trail map marked with a blue highlighter. It led straight up the ridge toward a spot labeled Old Outlook. I took 2 volunteers with me and hiked up that way. The forest was quiet again. No birds, no wind. Just the crunch of boots on pine needles. About 4 miles in, we found their campsite. The fire was long dead, but their gear was still there. 2 sleeping bags, a Jet-Boil trail mix scattered like it had been dumped in a hurry. One of the sleeping bags was zipped up from the inside. The other had been torn open from the top, shredded. Whatever happened, it happened fast. The worst part? Just past the campsite, where the trail sloped up toward the old overlook, we found tracks. But not just boot prints. There were drag marks, like someone had been pulled. And alongside the marks, something else, bare feet. No, not bare, hooved, but the prints weren't uniform. They shifted in depth and shape, some too wide, some too narrow. Almost like something was imitating prints without quite getting them right. I told the volunteers to head back and radio HQ. I followed the tracks up to the overlook. I shouldn't have gone alone. The overlook was silent. The trees there looked dead. Gray bark, brittle branches like winter had touched just that patch of forest and nowhere else. And sitting at the center of the overlook, a pile of clothes. Folded, neat, as if someone had just vanished right out of them. The tag on the jacket said Lucas. I heard the wind pick up behind me. Turned to look, nothing, but I could feel it. That presence again, watching, waiting. Over the next 48 hours, we swept every inch of that trail system. We never found the bodies, but every night, like clockwork, the same sound would come across the radio. Static, click, click, whisper. One night, I swear, I heard my own voice coming back through the line, repeating a phrase I hadn't said in years. I shouldn't have left her. It was what I'd said when my wife died. That broke me, because no one else knew. Whatever it was out there, it didn't just mimic Prince. It mimicked grief. It mimicked memory. The final straw came 3 days later. Another hiker, a young kid named Travis, came running into the station barefoot, shaking like a leaf. Blood on his shirt, eyes wide with terror. I got him into a chair, gave him water, tried to calm him down. He wouldn't stop whispering. It followed me. It followed me out. When I asked what he meant, he just said one thing over and over. It wore my dad's voice. That night I locked every window and door, packed my gear, called HQ, and filed for emergency leave. I don't care if it tanks my career. I'm done with Beerjaw Ridge. And if you're reading this, if you find this journal or hear this recording, don't go up there. Don't listen to the voices in the woods, because they know who you are, and they know what you fear. My name is Riley Maddox. I've been a forest ranger for 15 years, 9 of those spent working out of a remote station in the Daniel Boone National Forest, down in eastern Kentucky. It's quiet country, rugged, beautiful, but there are places out here that locals won't go, no matter the weather, no matter the season. One of those places is called Devil's Hollow. You won't find it on many maps, just a jagged slice of gorge running between the limestone cliffs, southwest of War Fork. It's a shadowed place where the sun barely reaches the ground and the mist never quite burns off. Most hikers walk around it. Locals say the animals don't go there, and the ones that do don't come back. I never used to believe in that kind of talk. Superstition, folklore. I respected it, but I didn't buy into it. Not until I got a call 2 months ago from dispatch. A couple had gone missing while camping near the hollow. Sarah and Callum Wells, mid-30s, out of Lexington. Their last GPS ping showed them crossing a dried-up creek bed that ran along the edge of Devil's Hollow. I didn't like it, but I grabbed my gear and drove out anyway. I parked near the old fire road just after 3:00 p.m. and started on foot. The air was heavy. Not humid exactly, just weighted, like the forest was holding its breath. The deeper I went, the less sound I heard. No bird song, no wind in the branches. Just the crunch of my boots and the slow beat of my pulse in my ears. It took me 2 hours to reach the spot where their last ping came in. Their tent was still there, unzipped, empty. No torn fabric, no blood. Just silence. The fire pit was cold. Their packs were neatly stacked inside the tent. That was the first thing that struck me as odd. Most people, if they're running from a bear, they don't stop to stack their bags. About 30 feet from the tent, I found tracks, 2 sets, both human, heading downslope toward the hollow. But halfway down the ridge, a third set appeared, and this one was wrong. Deep, uneven impressions, toes longer than they should have been, no heel marks, no shoe treads. It looked like something walked up out of the earth and followed them down into the gorge. I radioed it in, but the signal was choppy. Too much limestone in the cliffs, so I followed. The trail narrowed as I moved into the hollow. Vines hung low across the path. The air grew colder, not cool, cold, like I'd stepped into another season altogether. And that's when I noticed the smell, metallic, damp, like rust and rot and wet stone. I heard a sound to my left, a whisper, not a word, just the cadence of one, like someone had spoken almost loud enough to hear. I froze, listened. Then it came again, this time behind me. I spun around, flashlight raised. Nothing but trees. I kept going. And then I saw it. A cave halfway up the cliffside, not natural. The entrance was too round, too perfect. Stone markers, 3 of them, ringed the opening, each one etched with a symbol I didn't recognize. They weren't recent, covered in moss, some kind of warning maybe a seal. And right there, outside the entrance, I found something I'll never forget. Sarah's jacket, torn, one sleeve missing. It was soaked in something dark and dried. I took 1 step toward the cave and felt the ground shift beneath me, just slightly, like something deep below had moved. I backed away. Then the smell hit me again, stronger now. Rotting meat, old blood, something ancient and buried. I heard breathing behind me, deep, slow. Too close, I turned. Nothing. But the shadows around the trees looked different, longer, stretched. I tried to radio again, still nothing, so I left, fast. But I swear, even as I climbed out of that hollow, I heard footsteps behind me. Only they weren't on the ground, they were in the trees. Over the next few days, 2 more hikers vanished. Both near the hollow, we sent in a search team. 5 men, 2 K9 units. They came back with nothing, except one of the dogs. Its fur was matted with black sludge. It wouldn't stop shaking. When the vet looked at it, she found deep gouges under its skin, like something had dug into it with claws. But no wounds, no blood, just trauma. That night, the dog stopped barking. It started howling, low, long, like it was mourning something. 2 days later, it died. I started digging old reports, newspaper clippings, folk tales, anything I could find. There were stories, centuries old, about that hollow. The Shawnee called it the throat of the mountain, a place where the dead could speak and the living should never listen. Early settlers wrote about strange lights drifting through the trees, shadows with teeth. People hearing voices that sounded like loved ones long gone. One account from 1911 said a man found his brother's body there, standing upright, eyes wide, lungs full of water, even though there hadn't been rain in weeks. They said the hollow was cursed, but I don't think it's that simple. I think something lives down there, and I think it's waking up. Last week I went back. Don't ask me why. I waited until just after dusk and hiked back down, past the ridge, through the trees. No flashlight, just the moon and the sound of my own breath. When I reached the hollow again, it was colder than before. The mist hung low over the ground like smoke. The cave was still there, the same 3 stones watching it like sentinels. And that's when I saw her. Sarah, standing in the trees just beyond the cave entrance, pale, barefoot, her shirt torn. She wasn't moving, just watching me. I called her name. She didn't answer. I stepped closer, her head tilted to the side like she was listening. Then she smiled, but it wasn't right. There was too much teeth. I blinked, and she was gone. Just vanished. No sound, no sign. Only the whisper remained. Right next to my ear, "You came back." I ran, didn't stop until I saw the lights of the station cutting through the trees. Since then, I haven't gone back. But every night, just as I'm about to fall asleep, I hear the same sound in the trees behind my cabin. Click, click, click. Then the whisper, "You came back." And I know it's only a matter of time, because things like that, they don't just stay in the hollow. They follow you home. My name is Sam Riggins. I'm a seasonal fire lookout for the National Forest Service, 6 seasons and counting. Normally, I get posted in the Sierra Nevada or parts of southern Oregon, but this year was different. This year, they sent me to an old tower in the Salmon Chalet National Forest in central Idaho. They told me the tower had been decommissioned since the early 2000s. But due to increased fire risk in the region and a short staff, they needed someone to man it for the month of October. I didn't ask many questions. The solitude suited me. No cell service, no distractions, just 360-degree views of the backcountry and the occasional fire smoke on the horizon. I signed the waiver, packed up, and drove myself to the ranger station in Stanley. From there, a senior ranger named Collins took me up the rough logging road in an old pickup, stopping just shy of the final half-mile. "You'll have to hike from here," he told me. "The road washed out years ago." We stood in silence for a second. Then Collins glanced up at the looming tower in the distance, its silhouette rising above the pines like a skeletal finger. "Look, Sam," he said, "you'll be alone up here. No ranger rotation, no check-ins unless you radio us. That tower's not on the main grid anymore. The maps don't even label it." He paused, then added, "If you hear anything strange, just stay indoors. Keep the fire going. And whatever you do, don't answer the knock." I stared at him. "Don't answer the knock?" He didn't clarify, just handed me the keys and left. I laughed it off at first, probably just trying to freak out the newbie. But now, 2 weeks in, I'm starting to wonder. The first few days were peaceful. I settled into the tower, stocked with preserved food, dry firewood, a backup generator, and a CB radio tuned to the district channel. The structure creaked a little at night, but that was to be expected in an old building. I kept notes in the logbook, brewed coffee in the mornings, and spent hours with binoculars, scanning the treetops for smoke. But by day 6, things started feeling wrong. The forest below wasn't quiet, it was silent. Not a single bird call, no wind in the pines, not even squirrels in the brush. It was like the trees were holding their breath. I kept trying to rationalize it. Maybe the change in temperature, maybe animals migrating, but I knew forests. I knew what silence like that meant. Predator. Still, I tried to shake the feeling. But then came the smell. It started faint, just a hint of rot on the air, like wet leaves and something worse underneath. I figured maybe a deer had died nearby. I even ventured out with my .38 and a flashlight, but I didn't find any carcass. Just a few strange scratches on the trees near the base of the tower. Not claw marks, not even knife marks. They looked carved, spiral-shaped, rough, erratic, maybe old. I took photos, but they didn't come out well. And when I went back out the next day, some of the spirals had changed, deepened, grown. That night I locked every bolt on the hatch, threw an extra log in the wood stove, and didn't sleep. 3 nights ago, I heard the knock. It was just after 2 a.m., and I was reading by lantern light. The fire was low. Wind had picked up. I remember thinking I needed to restock firewood in the morning. Then, knock. Not on the door, on the support beam beneath the tower. 1 heavy strike. Wham, then a pause, then 2 more. Wham, wham. I froze. My hand went instinctively to the rifle by the cot. The knock came again. 3 this time. I moved to the trapdoor leading down the ladder, careful not to step too close. There was no one in sight, just a moonlit forest swaying slightly in the wind. Then I heard it, a whisper, faint, garbled. Sam. It wasn't possible. No one knew I was here besides the rangers. The radio hadn't picked up a single call in days. Then the knock came again. Knock, knock, knock. I stayed frozen for the next hour, rifle on my lap, heart pounding in my ears. It didn't come back that night, but I didn't sleep either. The next day I hiked out further, hoping to find tracks, a campsite, something. Instead I found more carvings, deeper this time, spreading to multiple trees, forming a strange radial pattern around the base of the hill the tower stood on. At the center was a large tree with a hollow trunk, and inside the hollow I found bones, small bones, maybe raccoon, maybe something else, arranged in a spiral. And under the bones, something shiny, an old park ranger badge. It was corroded, nearly unreadable, but the name etched into it, Collins, the same Collins who had dropped me off. When I got back to the tower, I radioed the ranger station. No answer. I kept calling for hours. Finally, at dusk, I heard static crackle through the speaker, then the faint sound of a voice. But it wasn't English. It sounded like chanting, words spoken in reverse. My blood ran cold. I shut the radio off. That night, the knock returned, and this time it didn't stop. Knock, knock, knock. Sam, knock. I turned off every light, sat in the corner of the tower with the rifle aimed at the hatch. I could hear something climbing slow, dragging movement on the ladder below. Nails scraping wood, heavy breathing, then silence, then tap, tap, tap. On the window behind me, I didn't look. I didn't move. I just stayed frozen until the sun came up. Yesterday, I tried to hike out. I made it 5 miles before I found the same tree I'd passed hours before, the hollow one. It was impossible. I hadn't looped back. I was moving in a straight line. But somehow the forest had turned me around. I tried again. Different direction. Same result. Always back to that hollow tree. The smell of rot stronger every time. There's something in the woods, and it's not just watching. It's waiting. Tonight is worse. The knocking hasn't stopped in hours. And now it's not just from below. It's on every wall, every window. They're circling the tower. I see them now, shapes in the trees, just beyond the reach of the lantern light. Eyes that glow, but not with light, with reflection, like mirrors. They whisper to me in my voice, calling from every direction. They know I'm alone, and they know I've seen too much. If anyone finds this, burn the tower, burn the trees, seal off the entire hill. There's something buried beneath this land, something old, and this place is not just a fire lookout anymore. It's a feeding ground. They told us not to chart the deeper tunnels beneath Black Hollow. That's the first thing I remember now when I think back. It wasn't an official order, not something in writing. But anyone who worked long enough at Mammoth Cave knew the unwritten rules. Stay out of Black Hollow's southern shaft. Not because it was structurally unsound, though it was, but because of the stories. The first time I ignored that rule, it was out of stubborn curiosity. The second time, it was desperation. And the third time was because it called me back. It started 3 weeks ago when a solo spelunker named Laura Brenner failed to check in. She'd registered at the visitor center, left a route plan, and never returned. Her gear was top tier. Experienced. Her route ended near the southern shaft. Of course it did. We organized a search party immediately. I was team lead. It was supposed to be a routine sweep. Check the planned path, follow the route, call it off if we didn't find any signs after 12 hours. But 12 hours turned into 18, then 24. On the second day, I found her helmet. It was lying at the mouth of a narrow fissure off the main corridor, a jagged crack that hadn't existed last season. Or maybe it had. The helmet still had her headlamp on, still glowing. We marked the site, filed our report, and shut down the corridor. But I couldn't stop thinking about that fissure. About the way my flashlight didn't reflect off the walls inside like it should have. About how the rock around the opening wasn't limestone. It was darker, veined, like it had bled once. A week later, a new ranger named Calvin started seeing things near Black Hollow. He said he saw lights, pale greenish-white flashes, in the corners of the cave. Said he heard voices when he was doing solo surveys. Thought it was echoes at first, until one of them said his name. They came again the next night, closer. He quit 2 days after that. Didn't pack. Just walked off the job. That was when I started dreaming again. It's hard to explain, but if you've worked long enough underground, you start to feel the difference between a dream and a memory. The dreams I had weren't mine. They belonged to someone or something that had never left the cave. I'd wake up gasping for air, soaked in sweat, with dirt under my nails and stone dust on my palms. One night I woke with a taste of copper in my mouth and the word down written on my wrist in what looked like rust. I went back. I brought 2 people with me. Allison Turner, young, fearless, and most importantly, she'd seen strange things before. And James Kincaid, former miner, now contracted cave mapper. The man had nerves of iron and equipment better than anything the Park Service could afford. We entered through the southern shaft at 3:47 a.m. I don't know why I insisted on that hour. It just felt right, like the cave wanted it that way. Allison carried audio equipment. James ran a live LiDAR scan as we moved. I led with map and memory. The air was wrong almost immediately. The deeper we went, the more it thickened. The walls sweated like they were breathing. Our radios picked up static that faded in and out, like voices arguing underwater. Then came the scratches. The LiDAR scanner lit up with irregular vertical lines, deep claw marks, maybe, or some kind of erosion. But they weren't there last season, and the deeper we got, the fresher they looked. At 5:12 a.m., we found Laura's boot wedged between 2 stones. It had blood on the inside. No body, no drag marks. Just the boot and the wet, slick sound of water dripping from somewhere it shouldn't be. Allison looked pale. I think it's watching us. James laughed nervously. Who? She didn't answer. We reached the fissure at 5:40. It had widened since the last time I saw it. Wide enough to crawl through now. Wide enough to swallow us whole. Allison hesitated, then slid inside with the recorder running. James followed, then me. The stone around the fissure wasn't just different in color, it was smooth, like it had been polished by something with hands. The chamber we entered was wrong. It was bigger than it should have been, the kind of size that doesn't make sense underground. The floor was wet, but the ceiling was dry. The air was freezing, but I was sweating. All around us, embedded in the walls, were things I don't want to call bones. They weren't fossilized. Some of them still had meat on them. Allison's recorder started picking up voices again, but they weren't speaking English. One of them was humming. That's when we saw the altar. At least it looked like one. A raised platform made of piled stone, covered in symbols that pulsed faintly with bioluminescence. James scanned it, and the screen on his LiDAR blacked out instantly. He started mumbling to himself, something about needing to go deeper. Allison, I said, backtrack now. But Allison didn't respond. She was staring at the altar with wide eyes, tears on her cheeks. I heard her, she whispered. Lavra, she's in the walls. I pulled her back, literally. James didn't move. The altar flared once, green-blue light like a heartbeat, and then went dark. James looked up, smiled. They're not dead, he said softly, just waiting. Then he walked behind the altar and disappeared. No scream, no sound, just gone. Allison and I ran. The tunnel back wasn't the same as before. It had changed, shifted. That's the thing about Black Hollow. It rearranges itself when it doesn't want you to leave. The walls closed in. The stone pulsed. The scratches on the walls began to twitch. I swear to you, they twitched like the rock itself was cracking open to let something out. We ran anyway. We screamed. At one point I dropped my flashlight. The cave didn't go dark. It glowed like something beneath the floor had opened its eyes. We made it back to the main corridor at 6:33 a.m. The moment we crossed that threshold, the air snapped back to normal. My compass started working again. My flashlight dimmed. We collapsed on the cold stone floor in silence. Allison had a nosebleed and a burn mark on her left wrist. It looked like a symbol, an antlered shape, curling into a spiral. Neither of us spoke the entire walk back to the surface. I filed the report. The official cause of James Kincaid's disappearance is lost during unauthorized exploration. Laura Brenner's remains were never found. The southern shaft of Black Hollow has since been sealed with reinforced steel and concrete. The fissure was collapsed by controlled detonation, but I hear it again, even now, when I pass the lower tunnels on patrol, when the wind dies and the air stands still, when I sleep, the tapping, the voices, the memory that wasn't mine, but wants to be whatever's beneath Black Hollow didn't die. It remembers, and it's hungry. I've worked the forest of Montana for nearly 2 decades. Fires, blizzards, mountain lions, lost hikers, even the occasional body. I've seen most of what nature can throw at a person, but nothing prepared me for the trail with no name. I'm not even sure it's a trail. Not really. It's more like a scar on the land that appears when it wants to, and once you see it, you don't forget. It started with a call about a missing hunter. His name was Wade Laramie. Local guy, early 40s, experienced. He'd been bow hunting elk up near the Burnt Creek area, north slope of the Gallatin Range, rough country, steep ridges, and dense pine. His brother reported him missing after he failed to check in 2 days after his scheduled return. Wade had a satellite phone but never used it. I volunteered to lead the initial sweep. Not because I was assigned, because of where he'd gone missing. See, I'd heard stories from the old-timers, quiet warnings, places they avoided without explanation. Burnt Creek was one of them. I loaded my gear, grabbed my dog, Samson, and headed out by sunrise. By late morning, I found Wade's last known campsite. His tent was still there, so was his pack. His bow, arrows, deer, untouched. Even his food wasn't raided. That told me something right away. He hadn't walked away. He'd vanished. Samson sniffed around, tail stiff, ears low. He didn't bark or whine, but his body language was off, like he was waiting for something to come up behind us. I followed what little trail there was north, hoping for prints or any sign of Wade heading deeper. That's when I found the path, not on the map, not even a game trail. It looked wrong, like someone had taken a massive hot knife to the forest floor, carving a narrow, perfect line through pine and stone. It ran straight through the trees, not winding like normal trails, but cutting in a direct, unnatural path toward the base of Mount Blacktail. I stared at it too long. It made my stomach twist. Samson wouldn't step on it, just stood there, tail between his legs. I should have turned back right then, but I didn't. The deeper I followed the path, the quieter the forest became. No birds, no wind, even the bugs stopped. The only sound was the crunch of my boots and the soft jingle of Samson's collar. It wasn't just the quiet that got to me, it was the stillness. The trees looked older here, denser, but there was no sign of rot or decay, no deadfall. It was like this part of the forest wasn't subject to time. I kept going. Eventually, I found something that made my blood run cold. A piece of Wade's flannel shirt caught on a branch. I called his name. Nothing, just silence, until Samson growled, low, steady, staring ahead into the trees like he saw something I couldn't. I raised my flashlight and swept it through the timber, and saw movement. Not an animal, not a man. It was tall, pale, and wrong. I caught just a glimpse, something with limbs too long and a face too smooth. It vanished the second my light hit it. I don't remember drawing my sidearm, but I was holding it when I backed down the trail. Samson didn't follow me. He ran full sprint, tail tucked. He never does that. I chased after him, lost sight of the path for 1 second, and when I turned around, it was gone. Just pine needles and brush, like it had never been there. I called off the search that night, told dispatch I'd found signs of Wade, but needed backup to continue deeper. They sent 2 other rangers, Elena and Brooks. Elena was sharp, ex-military. Brooks was a skeptic, science-first, logic-based. I told them what I'd seen. Brooks laughed. Elena didn't. We hiked back to the area the next morning, and the trail was there again, exactly where I said it would be, wider now. Brooks went pale when he saw it, didn't say a word. We followed it in silence. 2 hours in, we found the first marker, a tree carved with symbols, spirals, and antlers, and handprints. Some were red, some were fresh. Elena took photos. Brooks scanned the bark and muttered about cults or abandoned hunting lodges. That's when we heard Wade's voice. Faint, distant. Help, please. Elena sprinted toward the sound before we could stop her. By the time we caught up, she was standing at the mouth of a cave I'd never seen on any map. The inside looked like old lava tube, narrow and slick. Wade's voice came again, over here, closer, echoing weird, like it was coming from all directions. I stepped inside, calling his name. Wade, we're here. Then the voice changed, same tone, same pitch, but it said something else, wrong way, behind me. I turned around, light shaking, and saw another trail where there shouldn't be one. Leading deeper, Elena grabbed my arm. We're not alone in here. Brooks turned pale. Something's mimicking him. We left the cave, set up camp at a safe distance. Or so we thought. That night, everything changed. We each had nightmares. In mine, I saw Wade, crawling on all fours, skin pale and stretched thin, eyes gone, mouth torn wide open and whispering things in reverse. In Elena's, she was inside the cave, but couldn't move. The walls were breathing. Brooks refused to share his dream, just kept pacing. At 3:17 a.m., he disappeared, vanished without a sound. His tent unzipped, gear untouched, boots still there. Elena and I searched until dawn. When we finally found a clue, it was a whisper on the wind. Elena, her name, coming from nowhere. Then, Elena, wrong way. We burned the camp, left everything, hiked for hours until the woods felt normal again. The trail never reappeared. The symbols were gone, Brooks was never found, Wade either. I tried to file a report. They called it exhaustion, stress-induced hallucinations, but they still closed the area around Burnt Creek. No fanfare, just sealed it off and rerouted the trailheads. I stayed silent after that, until yesterday, because yesterday I got a voicemail from a hiker in the Gallatin Range, just static, and a voice distorted and slow saying, "Wrong way. The time stop, 3:17 a.m. They say not all trails are meant to be followed. Some lead to nowhere, some lead back to the same place, and some lead to something that was never meant to be seen. That's what Burnt Creek is, a trail with no name, a loop that doesn't close. Something alive, something waiting, and it remembers every step you take." My name is Evelyn Ross, and I've worked as a wilderness ranger along the north shore of Lake Superior for the past 12 years. Cold air, dense forest, black water. I've grown used to the silence of this place, but nothing prepares you for when that silence starts to speak back. I was stationed out near Cascade River this fall, monitoring trail erosion and closing up campsites for the season. Just me and a small radio tower perched high above the lake. The others had gone home weeks ago. I liked it that way. After losing my brother Isaac last winter, lost, not dead, there's a difference. I wasn't ready to be around people again. He disappeared in the Boundary Waters. Solo paddling trip. No distress call, no wrecked canoe, just gone. I told him not to go in October. But he loved the silence of late fall, the way fog clung to the water like memory. I hadn't been able to shake the feeling that something had taken him. Not drowned, not lost, taken. I'd been logging trail closures near a seldom-used access point north of Temperance River, an area the locals call Hollow Bay. The name fits. Trees grow strange there, bent at odd angles like they're shrinking away from the shoreline. The water always looks black, no matter the light. Locals say the bedrock is unstable, that sinkholes form beneath the surface, but that doesn't explain the other stories. Fishermen hear voices. Dogs refuse to drink from it. Kids used to dare each other to swim there until one didn't come back. That morning I found a canoe washed up at the edge of the bay, yellow fiberglass, cracked and half submerged in reeds. No ID tag, no gear, just a paddle lying neatly across the seats. I radioed it in, but reception was spotty that far north. I marked the GPS and decided to drag it onto shore when I returned the next day with a team. But that night, I had a dream. I was floating above the lake, the water beneath me, as still as obsidian glass. Below the surface, I could see pale forms moving slow and sinuous, like people drifting without breath. One of them looked up. It had no eyes, just smooth skin where they should have been, and its mouth opened too wide, showing rows of stone-like teeth. I woke up gasping, my body slick with sweat, the faint smell of wet earth still clinging to my clothes. I told myself it was just stress, just grief. The next day I hiked back to the bay. The canoe was gone. Instead, I found footprints, bare feet, small like a child's, but the toes were too long, the arches wrong. They trailed from the edge of the water into the woods and vanished about 20 yards in. The soil was disturbed. Something had dragged itself up and left again. I didn't radio this in, not yet. Instead, I went back to camp and dug out an old field journal I kept from my early days. Inside it were notes from a conversation I'd had with an Oshibui elder named Marie Ashka years ago. She'd warned me about the Bay of Waiting Teeth, her words. She said there were spirits beneath Lake Superior, ones that lived deeper than fish, deeper than bedrock. Ones that watched, and once every few decades they sent something up to look around, not to hunt, to replace. That night the wind shifted. It came from the lake, not the land, carrying with it a sound I can only describe as breathing. I couldn't sleep, so I hiked back to Hollow Bay, flashlight in hand. Just before the shoreline, I spotted something sticking out of the sand, fabric. I dug gently and uncovered what looked like a child's life vest. The name Connor was written inside in faded Sharpie. There hadn't been a missing child report in the last 5 years. I turned to head back when I heard the splash. Something had broken the surface of the lake. Not violently, but deliberately. I aimed my light toward the sound and saw ripples spreading across the black water. And then I saw it, something standing waist deep in the lake, still as stone. It was shaped like a person, but wrong. Too thin, too tall. Its head slowly turned toward me, but there were no eyes, no face, just wet, pale skin and a slow whine, clicking sound that echoed across the water like stones tapping underwater. I didn't run. I couldn't. Something about it froze me, like it knew me. And then, in a voice that didn't belong in this world, it said, "Evelyn." I dropped my light and ran. Back at camp, I locked the door and sat with my rifle in hand until morning. I didn't sleep. I didn't breathe. Just waited, listening for footsteps that never came. The next day I drove to the tribal center in Grand Portage and found Marie Ashka. I told her everything. Her eyes didn't blink once. She said, "Your brother went too deep. I think he's still out there," I said. She nodded slowly. "He is. But not how you remember." I begged her to explain. She told me of the Nibiana Beck, the water women, though they aren't just women anymore. They were once caretakers, protectors of the balance. But centuries of desecration, oil, mining, blood, drove them to despair. They took to the deeps and became something else. Not evil, just forgotten. Now they seek balance again by taking back what they've lost. The lost don't die. They change. They are becoming water, she said. And the lake remembers. I went back one last time. Not to fight. Not to investigate. To find Isaac. I brought nothing but a flare, a recorder, and my heart pounding loud enough to feel in my teeth. I stepped into the lake barefoot, waiting until the cold gripped my bones. The water was too still, too warm. And then I saw him, standing waist deep, just like before, his face pale, his mouth slightly open. No eyes, but I knew it was him. I felt it in my blood. "Isaac," I whispered. He turned toward me, slowly, painfully, like his joints no longer remembered how to move. "I'm sorry," he said. Then he vanished beneath the water without a ripple. I dropped to my knees in the shallows and wept. The recorder still played in my pocket. When I got back, I listened to it. There was only one sound, soft, rhythmic clicking, and after 20 seconds, a whisper. It said, "She will need more." I transferred out a month later. I never returned to Hollow Bay, but I still hear the breathing when I camp too close to Superior, and sometimes I dream of children with no eyes standing at the edge of the water, waiting for someone to call them back. My name is Daniel Price. I've worked as a wilderness ranger for over 15 years. Most of those years have been spent in the White River National Forest, out near Rifle, Colorado. It's quiet work, lonely at times, sure, but peaceful. You get to know the rhythms of the land, the way the pines lean in certain wind patterns, the shift in animal calls before a storm, how silence usually means something's watching you. I never believed in folklore or cryptids or any of the stories older rangers would whisper over campfires. I thought they were just bored guys with too much time on patrol and too much whiskey in their blood. But that was before 2003. That was before the Chaffin Hollow incident. We got a call in early September. 2 college kids had gone missing: Camden Morales and Juliet Brinks. They'd been hiking a less used trail just west of Chaffin Hollow, not far from the border of the Flat Tops Wilderness. Supposedly, they were experienced, brought gear, logged their route with the station, told their parents they'd be back by Sunday evening. But they never came back. I was assigned to the search along with Ranger Liz Coulter and a newer guy, Jack Embers. The 3 of us headed out at dawn the next day. The air was sharp with the cold bite of early fall, and fog hugged the ground so tight it swallowed our boots. We reached their parked car at the base of the trailhead. Everything was normal, doors locked, food wrappers in the back seat, 2 empty water bottles. Their footprints started off clear enough on the trail, but by the time we reached the first ridge, the fog got thicker. The prints vanished. It wasn't just the fog, though. I've tracked elk through blizzards, and those prints don't just disappear. The ground gets strange up there, mushy in places, hard and dry in others. It's like the forest can't decide what season it's in. Jack joked it felt like we were walking through a dream someone had half finished. Liz didn't laugh. She just kept glancing into the trees like something was pacing us. Around noon, we found their first campsite. The fire pit was still warm. Camden's bag was there, but Juliet's was missing. There were strange scuff marks in the dirt, not like anything I'd seen before. They looked like deer tracks, but were too narrow and too long, almost deliberate, like something was mimicking a deer, but didn't quite get it right. Jack pointed out tufts of dark hair tangled in the bark of a pine tree nearby. At first, I thought it was just elk fur, but when I touched it, my hand recoiled. It was coarse and oily, smelled like copper and wet ash. Liz said she'd seen something similar once on a reservation trip she did years ago. She muttered something under her breath, "Ye now Lucy." I didn't ask what it meant at the time. We decided to stay the night. We set up camp just off the trail near the edge of a ravine. As the sun went down, the forest changed. The birds stopped calling. Even the bugs went silent. It felt like the trees were leaning in, listening. That night, something came to our camp. It started with the whispering. Just beyond the firelight, we heard someone calling Juliet's name, then Camden's. Liz shot up, flashlight shaking in her hand. "Don't answer it," she said firmly, voice low. "It's not them." Jack thought it was just locals messing with us. He called out anyway. "Hey, Camden, Juliet, we're here to help." The whispering stopped. For a moment there was silence so deep it felt like the whole forest was holding its breath. Then we heard something crash through the brush. Jack turned his flashlight and caught something in the beam, a figure standing just beyond the tree line. It looked human at first, but the longer I looked, the more wrong it seemed. It was too tall, maybe 7 feet, with long, sinewy arms and legs like branches. Its head jerked when the light hit it, and its eyes, its eyes, reflected back like an animal's, but they were set in a face that looked disturbingly like Juliet's. It vanished before we could react. Liz screamed, dropped her light. Jack drew his sidearm, but he was shaking so badly he almost dropped it. We didn't sleep that night. Every hour we'd hear footsteps circling the camp. Low growls, whispers, and sometimes we'd hear our own voices calling out to us from the dark. The next morning, Liz was gone. Her sleeping bag was torn open like an animal had clawed it apart, but there was no blood, no drag marks, nothing. Just gone. Jack wanted to head back. I agreed, but we couldn't find the trail. We circled for hours, the compass spun. GPS wouldn't load. Every direction looked the same, and somehow the sun never seemed to move. Eventually, we stumbled back into that same clearing with the fire pit. The wood was still smoking. Jack started crying. We hadn't left. That night, I heard Liz's voice calling from the ravine. "Danny, help me." It wasn't her voice. Not exactly. It was hollow, like it had been recorded and played through a broken speaker. I didn't go to the edge. I just sat by the fire with Jack. We didn't speak, didn't sleep. At sunrise, we finally found the trail again, or it found us. It was just there like it had always been, though I swear it wasn't the night before. We ran all the way back to the truck. When we got to the ranger station, Jack quit on the spot. Never even picked up his last paycheck. Liz was never found. Neither were Camden or Juliet. The official report said mountain lion. Locals didn't buy it. I went back to that trail once, just once, a month later, alone. There was a tree near the ravine I hadn't noticed before. Someone or something had carved into the bark. A crude symbol, a human figure with antlers. Below it, 5 words. You looked when we called. I've never gone back since, and I never will. My name is Andrew Callahan, and I was a ranger in the Redwater Ridge region of northern Montana for 15 years. I thought I knew the forest better than I knew myself, but nothing, no amount of survival training, search and rescue ops, or backwoods living could have prepared me for what I saw that autumn. It was October 2016. The air was just starting to turn. Days were still warm, but nights dropped into the 30s. That week, the trailhead at Ponder's Gap had seen 2 separate reports of strange screaming at night. Not mountain lion screaming, those are bad enough, and everyone around here knows what they sound like. These screams were described as human, but not quite. Like someone trying to sound human, one caller said. Ordinarily, I'd brush it off. Locals love a ghost story once the leaves start to turn. But one of the reports came from a retired biologist I trust. Guy lived up near Whisper Lake for 20 years. If he says something was wrong, something was wrong. So I took a small pack, my .45, and drove up to Station 12, the most isolated outpost in the entire district, about 3 miles from the trailhead, nestled deep in the pines. I hiked the last stretch in. My truck won't make it down the final dirt path unless it's bone dry, and the rains earlier that week had turned the road into oatmeal. I made it to the cabin around dusk, lit the wood stove, and unpacked. The ranger station itself is just a 1-room pine box with a cot, a small desk, and a crackling radio that works when the wind blows right. There's a deck that overlooks the drop into Redwater Gorge. Beautiful view, if you ignore what's out there. The first night was still. No wind, no crickets. Not even the distant hoot of an owl, just dead silence. I didn't sleep well. Second day, I hiked out toward the lake. Whisper Lake sits in the crook of Redwater Gorge, like a silver coin dropped into a pit. It's one of the most hauntingly quiet places I've ever been. While circling the edge, I found something that stopped me cold. A ring of deer bones, picked clean, arranged in a perfect circle with a pile of moss in the center. It looked almost ceremonial. I took a picture with my phone, which promptly died. Battery full when I left that morning. I stood there a long time just listening. Still nothing, no birds, no bugs, just wind through the branches, and even that sounded off, like it was moving through a hollow shell of forest, not a living one. On my hike back, maybe a mile from the station, I heard movement behind me. Slow, rhythmic footsteps. I stopped. It stopped. I turned, nothing. But I got the sense that whatever it wasn't hiding. It was watching, not like an animal tracking prey, more like curiosity testing me. When I got back, I latched the cabin door for the first time in years. That night, something walked around the station. I heard the steps through the dry leaves, steady, deliberate. I sat on the cot with my pistol in hand, lights off, heart pounding like a war drum. Then, from the porch, came this voice, low and scratchy, like someone who hadn't spoken in years. Ranger, that was it. Just that one word. It said it like a question. I didn't move, didn't breathe, just stared at the door, waiting for the knob to turn. It didn't. Eventually, the footsteps retreated, slowly, like it wanted me to know it was leaving. The next morning, I radioed the district supervisor, told him I was cutting the trip short. I didn't say why, just blamed a stomach bug. The radio popped with static, and then a voice replied, not the supervisor, not even anyone I recognized. "Don't leave, Ranger. We haven't finished yet." I turned off the radio. Packed up. Didn't even eat breakfast. I made it out of there by mid-afternoon, never stopping to rest. I got back to town, handed in my gear, and took a few days off. But I couldn't shake what happened. Here's where things get stranger. When I developed the photos from my trip, because yes, I brought a film camera too, out of habit, I found an extra image, one I didn't take. It showed me asleep in the cabin, framed through the window, taken from outside. The angle was wrong, too, higher than a person's eye level, almost like it was taken from up in the trees. I showed it to the sheriff. He thought I was messing with him, told me to lay off the campfire whiskey. 2 weeks later, the biologist who'd reported the screams, he went missing. They found his cabin door open, the place ransacked, and an empty ring of deer bones behind his house. No signs of struggle, no blood, just a smear of moss on the windowsill and scratch marks around the back door, like something tall had crouched there, watching, waiting. I think those things out there, they mimic, but not just sounds. They mimic people, movements, faces. I think they watch from the trees, learn from us, and I think they're getting better at it. I left the Ranger Service not long after, moved south. Got a job with the State Park Service in Arizona. The desert's quieter, cleaner, and the things that hunt at night usually die with the sun. But every now and then, especially on windless nights, I swear I hear something in the distance. Not an animal, not quite human, just a voice rasping through the dark. Ranger, my name is Samuel Redbark, and this happened in 2002. I was 29, a member of the Lakota Nation, working as a wildlife officer out near the Black Hills. Most of my job involved tagging elk or relocating the occasional mountain lion that wandered too close to town. Nothing I couldn't handle until the incident at Old Rock Pass. Old Rock Pass is this narrow ridge road that cuts through a section of the hills no one really ventures into anymore. It used to be a logging road back in the 50s, but now it's nothing more than a broken scar through dense pine and limestone cliffs. Locals said it was cursed, claimed they'd seen lights up there or shadows that didn't move quite right. I'd always written it off as bad moonshine stories or leftover trauma from the uranium mining days, but I found out firsthand how wrong I was. It started when a park hiker named Teresa Choate went missing. Her boyfriend reported that she'd gone up toward the ridgeline alone the day before to take some wildlife photography and never came back. Normally, search and rescue handles that sort of thing, but I was already patrolling near the area, so I volunteered to start the search. I didn't go alone. My partner that week was a guy named Joe Running Water, older than me, twice as steady. He'd been with the service almost 15 years. We drove up together in the department's old Ford Bronco, the tires grumbling as we climbed over rocks and tree roots. We reached the ridge around 4 p.m. and started on foot. The trail was rough, fallen branches everywhere, and the wind had that smell, cold pine mixed with something faintly sour, like wet copper. About a mile in, we found Teresa's tripod. It was snapped clean in half like someone had stomped on it. Her camera was nearby, but the lens was shattered, and the SD card was gone. That's what really got to me. A hiker losing their gear? Happens. But someone intentionally removing the memory card? That meant someone else was up here. Joe squatted beside the tripod, touching the splintered wood. "Whatever stepped on this had weight," he said. "A bear, maybe. But bears don't take SD cards," I muttered. The sun was starting to go when we heard it, a high-pitched sound, almost like a child's cry, echoing faintly from down the ridge. I looked at Joe. "Mountain lion?" I offered, but he was already shaking his head. "No, that's not a cat." His voice was tight. "That's not a sound I know." We decided to follow it. About 20 minutes down the ridge, we found an old trail marker, one I didn't recognize, even with my years on this land. It was a stone, smooth and flat, with a spiral carved deep into the center. The kind of spiral I'd seen before in some of the older pictographs, but not out here, and not like this. Joe stepped in front of me, breathing hard. "We need to turn back." "Why?" He stared at the spiral like it was burning his eyes. "Because we're not alone anymore." That was when the lights started. Not flashlights, not campfires. Just orbs, maybe the size of a basketball, glowing a dull orange, drifting slowly through the trees ahead. They moved with purpose, too slow to be drones, too erratic for lanterns. We stood there frozen, watching them dance between the trees, pulsing like slow heartbeats. And then we heard her, "Help me." It was Teresa's voice. No mistaking it. It was coming from the trees just beyond the lights. "Teresa," I yelled, pushing forward, but Joe grabbed me. "That's not her. That's not a human voice." It sounded like her, sure, but now I heard it. The rhythm was wrong, the pauses too long, like something was learning to talk. Then it laughed. We backed up slowly, rifles raised. One of the lights broke away and floated toward us. The air went cold, not desert night cold, freezer cold. I could see my breath hanging in front of me. "Back to the truck," Joe hissed. We turned to run, but we'd been followed. Standing between us and the trail was a shape, tall, gaunt, with long limbs and no face. Not really. Just smooth skin stretched across where eyes and a mouth should have been. But it had antlers, blackened, rotten things growing out like cancer. It didn't move, just stood there, tilting its head, like it was studying us. Joe raised his rifle and fired, once, twice. The echo slammed through the trees. The thing didn't fall. It didn't even flinch. It just opened its mouth, a horizontal gash that split its lower face, and screamed. I've heard mountain lions scream. I've heard coyotes dying. I've never heard anything like this. We bolted. No plan, just survival. Trees whipped at our faces, the ground disappearing under our boots. I swear I could hear it running behind us, impossibly fast, breaking branches and moaning in that same unnatural voice. We didn't stop until we hit the truck, panting, shaking, bloody from the thorns. Joe slammed the door, started the engine. The headlights flickered, then caught something in the beams. Teresa, standing in the road, barefoot, dress torn, eyes wide. Joe stopped the truck. I jumped out. "Teresa," I ran up to her. You're okay. But she didn't move, didn't blink. She opened her mouth. "Help me," she said again, then smiled. It wasn't a human smile. Too wide, too many teeth. Her pupils vanished, replaced by black pits. Joe screamed behind me. I turned back and saw the lights, dozens of them, encircling the truck, gliding toward us through the pines. I grabbed Teresa's arm, and it bent wrong, like rubber. She fell apart in my hands, crumbling into what looked like dry bark and old hair. I didn't stop to think. I ran back to the truck, jumped in, and Joe gunned it. We didn't talk until we were halfway down the mountain. "I don't know what that was," he said, eyes fixed forward, hands trembling on the wheel. "But it wasn't from this world. We reported what we found, the camera, the tripod, the missing hiker, but left out the rest. You can't write faceless mimic demon with bark skin and voice theft abilities and a government report. Teresa was never found. No trace of her ever turned up. And the lights? They kept showing up even after I left the service. I moved away a year later, took a job in Oregon. I don't patrol anymore, but I still hear stories, glowing lights in the trees, voices calling out at night, something moving through the pines that doesn't leave tracks. I stay away from places like Old Rock Pass now, but sometimes I still see the lights just beyond the tree line, watching, waiting. My name's Jesse Crow, and before everything went to hell, I used to guide backcountry trips through the Black Hills, mostly week-long treks for folks who wanted to get away from it all. I knew those woods like the back of my hand. I respected the land, honored it. But no matter how well you know a place, there are always corners better left unexplored. The group that week was small, just 4 clients and myself. College-aged kids from Minneapolis, 2 couples on a road trip detour. They wanted the real forest experience. I figured fine. The weather was crisp, the fall foliage in full swing, and the trail I planned was remote, but manageable. No cell reception, of course, but I had my radio and satellite beacon. I wasn't worried. The kids were Tyler and May, Levi and Elena, young, loud, full of energy. I got the sense they weren't used to being unplugged. The first night was all jokes and s'mores and horror stories around the fire. Typical stuff. Someone brought up skinwalkers and wendigos, always the urban legends. I let them talk. I'd heard it all, but the weirdness started on the second night. We were camped near a ridge known as Raven's Shoulder. It overlooks a steep gorge, beautiful in daylight, ominous as hell at night. Around 2:00 a.m., I was woken by movement, crunching leaves, and soft footsteps around the tents. My first thought was a black bear. I quietly grabbed my flashlight and stepped outside, but there was nothing. The woods were silent, too silent. No wind, no insects, no animal noises, just stillness. I checked on the kids, all in their tents. But Levi was sitting upright, wide-eyed. "You okay?" I whispered. He just stared past me and said, "I thought I saw someone standing at the edge of the trees, just watching us." I panned my flashlight toward the ridge. Nothing, but I believed him. His voice was too steady for it to be a joke. The next morning, May said she had a dream of someone whispering her name over and over. Elena woke up with a bloody nose, and Levi's hiking boots were missing from outside his tent. Weird, but I didn't panic. Animals take things sometimes, and people dream strange stuff in the woods. That's what I told them, what I told myself. We pressed deeper into the forest. The ridge trail wrapped around the gorge and curved into a narrow, elevated pass that eventually descended into a place the locals call Hollow Creek. It's not on many maps anymore. Back in the early 1900s, a small logging camp was built down there, but there was a collapse in one of the hillsides. Killed everyone. After that, the area got a reputation. Superstitions, bad luck, the usual stories. Most people stayed away, but I figured, what the hell, we'd be camping above the old site, not in it. That night was colder. Everyone was tired and quiet. No more jokes. Something had shifted. The forest felt tense. At around 1:00 a.m., I heard whispering. Not the wind, not my imagination. Actual voices, coming from down the slope. I unzipped my tent and stepped out into the freezing air. I didn't call out, just listened. The whispers continued, rising and falling like breath, like chanting. I couldn't make out the words, but the cadence was wrong. Not English, not any language I knew. Then Levi screamed. I sprinted toward his tent, but it was already empty. The others were scrambling out of their bags, panicked. We searched for over an hour. Nothing, no prints, no torn fabric, no sound. Like he'd vanished mid-breath, Tyler wanted to call search and rescue. I activated the beacon, but I already knew we wouldn't get a signal in the valley. I told them we'd hike to higher ground in the morning. The remaining 3 kids stayed close to me that night, huddled by the fire. No one slept. The next morning, we climbed the pass in silence, heading toward a nearby summit I'd used before to get signal. We were halfway up when May started crying. Her voice shook as she told me she saw Levi standing in the trees the night before, watching her. He didn't look right, she said. He was smiling too wide. Tyler snapped, accused her of making it up. Elena tried to keep the peace, but none of us could deny the growing sense of dread. The forest wasn't just quiet anymore. It was listening. We reached the summit around midday, and I got a weak signal. I sent the emergency alert and our coordinates. Then we waited. That night, the whispering returned, louder, closer. It was everywhere. Not one voice, but many, dozens, hundreds. Like the forest itself was speaking in tongues. I told the kids to stay put and went to check the perimeter. I took my rifle. I didn't believe it would help. I found Elena standing in a clearing a few hundred feet from camp. She was barefoot, her face blank. "Galena?" I whispered. She turned slowly. Her eyes were pitch black. No sclera. No iris, just darkness. I stumbled backward, nearly dropped the rifle. She smiled, too wide, and walked into the trees. I didn't follow. When I returned to camp, May was gone. Tyler was curled up in the dirt, crying. "They called her," he said. "They told her it was okay." I grabbed him, forced him to walk. We hiked back toward Raven's Shoulder, hoping to meet search and rescue halfway, but something followed us. I could feel it. We reached the ridge just before dawn, and that's when Tyler stopped. I turned and saw him staring into the trees. "She's there," he whispered. Then he stepped backward off the ridge. Just like that, gone. They found me 2 days later, disoriented, dehydrated, alone. When I told them what happened, they searched for weeks. Never found a single trace of the kids. Not a scrap of clothing, not a shoe, nothing. The official report said they were lost. Got turned around. But I know the truth. I've since left the job, moved to Rapid City. Haven't been back in the woods since. Sometimes I still hear the whispering. When it's quiet, when I'm alone, calling my name, and I know deep down that the Black Hills aren't finished with me yet. Not by a long shot. My name is Thomas Rainwater. I was a seasonal fire crew lead with the National Park Service back in the late 2000s. We mostly did prescribed burns and cleared brush, especially in the more overgrown parks that didn't have regular visitors. In the fall of 2009, I was assigned to a quiet little park called Devil's Glen Preserve in eastern Iowa. Not many people outside the state even know it exists. 2,000 acres of rolling woods and limestone cliffs, tucked away behind farmland and river bends. Beautiful country, but the kind of place that breathes a little too deeply at night. I was sent in with 3 others, Liam, our Sawyer, Carla, a field tech from Minnesota, and Owen, who was new and barely spoke a word. Our job was to do fuel reduction across the southern ridge, clear out the old pine and maple blowdowns before they became a fire hazard. It was supposed to be a week-long job, quick and uneventful. We arrived on a Monday morning. The ranger station was unmanned, just a note left on the clipboard that read, "Trail work postponed past the bluff. Stick to marked areas." No explanation. No signature. We figured it was some hiker warning, or maybe the local warden being cautious after a storm. Still, it put me on edge. The first few days were fine, quiet, productive. We camped near the trailhead, set up our gear, and spent the daylight hours sawing through brush and deadfall. Liam kept things light with bad jokes, and Carla always had some ghost story about every patch of forest in the Midwest. But then Owen started acting strange. At first it was little things, wandering off without telling anyone, standing too long just staring at nothing. Then, late on the 3rd night, I caught him outside the tents, barefoot in the dirt, muttering under his breath. His face was pale and glassy-eyed, turned toward the slope that led deeper into Devil's Glen. "Owen," I asked, "you all right?" He turned to me slowly and said something I'll never forget. "They're calling us from under the roots." He didn't say anything else, just walked back to his tent and zipped it shut. Carla joked about it the next morning, but I was already watching the woods a little closer. There was something wrong with the way sound moved out there. You'd hear a bird call, and it would echo too far. You'd snap a branch and hear a second one break a second later, like the forest was answering you. That evening, Liam didn't come back. We'd split up to clear more ground, and by sunset he still wasn't at camp. I radioed, but all I got was static. Carla and I hiked the trail loop twice. Nothing. No tracks, no sign of a struggle. Just his helmet and gloves laid neatly on a moss-covered rock about a mile from camp. The next morning, Carla wanted to hike out and report it, but Owen said something that made my blood run cold. If he's quiet now, it's already too late. I asked him what he meant. He just smiled like it wasn't even him behind his eyes anymore. We packed up camp anyway. Carla and I agreed. We were hiking out and leaving Owen if he didn't follow. The trail back was uneventful at first, but halfway up the ridge I noticed something off. There were boot prints next to mine in the dirt, the same tread as Liam's boots. I crouched and counted them. They were fresh. Not only that, they circled ours. Like someone had been walking alongside us just out of sight. Carla noticed them, too. She went pale, then dropped her gear and started jogging ahead. I called after her, but she was already gone over the ridge bend. I ran after her, and that's when the forest went silent. I don't mean quiet, I mean dead silent. No wind, no birds, no insects. Even my footsteps sounded muffled. It was like the air was holding its breath. Then I heard whispering, soft and distant at first, like wind rustling leaves, but the wind wasn't blowing. I followed it out of instinct, hoping it might lead me to Carla. That's when I saw them. Figures, tall and thin, like stretched shadows between the trees. They didn't move like people. They swayed, pulsing slowly with the rhythm of the forest. They didn't make noise. They didn't breathe. I froze. My body wouldn't move. Then Carla screamed. I ran blindly, crashing through brush and branches, until I found her, or what was left. She wasn't torn apart. She wasn't bloody. She just looked hollow. Her skin was pale, lips parted slightly, like she'd been trying to say something. Her eyes were open, but they weren't seeing. Beside her, etched into the dirt, were symbol spirals and slashes that pulsed with moisture despite the dry ground. Then Owen stepped out from behind a tree, but it wasn't Owen anymore. His body was still his, but something had changed behind his eyes. His movements were smooth, too graceful. His voice was soft, like silk wrapping around your ears. "You stayed too long," he whispered. "What are they?" I asked. He tilted his head. "They were here before the roots, before the stone. They don't take you. You become them." I ran. I don't remember how far I ran or how long. The sun was just beginning to rise when I reached the service road. A survey truck nearly hit me as I stumbled into its path. The driver was a park tech, confused and horrified. They found Carla's body, but no trace of Liam and Owen. No one found him either. The official report called it exhaustion, trauma, possible misidentification of wildlife activity. I never went back. I moved west, took a desk job. I haven't walked into a forest since, but sometimes when I close my eyes and let the quiet settle, I hear them whispering under the roots, waiting for me to come back. My name is Darren Gray Wolf, and this happened to me in the fall of 2002. I was working as a seasonal trail coordinator for the Forest Service near Echo Hollow in Washington State, an isolated stretch of land bordering the Olympic Peninsula. The region's thick with fir and cedar, often wrapped in fog that makes the world feel a little thinner out there. I was raised Ojibwe, but after my father passed, my mom remarried, and we moved west. I never lost that part of me, though. My grandfather used to say there were places the land never forgot, places where old things still wandered. Echo Hollow, I would come to learn, was one of them. My assignment was simple: flag deteriorating trails and mark hazard zones for a rerouting project the following spring. I'd been given a map, a radio, and an old two-way GPS unit. Nothing fancy. I'd be staying in a refurbished ranger's cabin about 8 miles off the main service road. No neighbors, no cell signal. Just me, the trees, and the sound of the wind threading through the pines. The first 2 days were uneventful. I spent my time walking the ridge trails, noting erosion points and snapping photos of collapsed switchbacks. The place was quiet, quieter than I expected. Even the birds kept low. Fog moved in each afternoon and sat heavy over the treetops, which was typical, but this was different. Thick, almost intentional. It moved like it had a mind. I didn't think much of it until the 3rd day. Around dusk, I was hiking back toward the cabin when I saw something strange near a trail junction. A rock cairn, only it wasn't made of stones. It was bone, cleaned, stacked carefully in a spiral, maybe 2 feet tall. Deer bones, maybe. Small animal skulls nestled in the center. At first, I thought it was a prank. Locals sometimes left weird things to mess with new rangers, but this felt too old, too deliberate. That night, I sat by the fireplace, flipping through old ranger logs I'd found in a locked drawer. Most were routine, weather notes, animal sightings, fallen trees. But the logs from the 1980s started to shift tone. One ranger had written, "Saw them again in the fog. Same place near the hollow. Heard the whispering." Another entry, "Don't go near the standing stones. Doesn't matter if you don't see them. If you hear the singing, turn around." The hairs on my arms stood up. I tried to sleep, but the wind had picked up, and with it came a sound I couldn't explain. It wasn't howling. It was humming, low and steady, almost musical. The next morning I went back to the bone cairn. It was gone. No sign it had ever been there. No prints. Nothing. The fog clung low to the trees like a living thing, and I started to feel like I was being watched. Every creak of a branch or scuttle of something small in the underbrush made me flinch. I chalked it up to nerves. Isolation can mess with you if you're not careful. Later that afternoon, I hiked toward Echo Hollow proper, a deep basin of old-growth forest that hadn't been logged in over 100 years. As I descended, the air grew colder, the light dimmer. Moss hung thick from the branches like curtains, and the fog pooled in the lowlands like water. That's when I heard it again, whistling, not wind, a tune, deliberate, repetitive. I froze. My gut screamed at me to turn back, but I kept going, drawn forward like a thread was tugging at my ribs. And then I saw them, figures barely visible in the fog. Tall, thin, standing between the trees, unmoving, watching. I stepped back, my boot snapping a branch. The figures vanished like smoke. I turned and ran. I made it back to the cabin by dark, locked the door, and didn't sleep. I stayed by the window all night, clutching the GPS and my knife. Around 3 a.m., the fog pressed against the glass like a living sheet, and for a moment, I swear, I saw a hand, long with too many joints. By morning, I'd made up my mind I needed to leave. I packed fast, shouldered my gear, and headed north toward the main trail. But something was wrong. The GPS wouldn't lock a signal. My compass spun aimlessly. Every tree looked the same, and the trail I marked the day before was gone. Covered, replaced. I was lost. I tried retracing my steps. Hours passed. The fog never lifted. That humming returned, closer now, circling me. I stumbled upon another cairn, taller this time, with a crow's skull perched atop like a crown. My head pounded and blood dripped from my nose. Then came the voices, not loud, not angry, just wrong, twisting around my thoughts. "We remember you," they whispered. "You left us. You forgot the old ways." I dropped to my knees, clutching my head. I prayed in English and Ojibwe, anything to drown it out. And then, just like that, it stopped. The fog began to clear. The sun broke through the canopy. My GPS beeped and flickered to life. I was less than a mile from the road. I never found the cabin again. They sent a team out later that week to investigate, but they couldn't locate it. My tracks vanished halfway down the trail. The bone cairns were gone. So were the ranger logs. I quit not long after. Moved back east. Took a job teaching wilderness survival instead of living it. But sometimes when the fog rolls in, I hear that humming again. Faint, calling. And I remember what the forest told me. "We remember you." My name is Kyle Redfeather, and this happened to me in the fall of 2004. I was 31 at the time, working as a wilderness fire watchman in the Sawtooth Mountains of Idaho. It's quiet work, mostly uneventful, days spent in the tower, scanning the horizon, making sure a lightning strike hadn't started something that could get out of control. That solitude suited me just fine. I'd grown up around forests, descended from generations of Nez Perce, and I'd always found more comfort among pine and stone than I ever did among people. The tower I worked from, Station 14, was remote. To get there, you had to take an ATV 10 miles past the ranger outpost, then hike another 3 miles up switchbacks. It sat on a rocky ledge overlooking a vast valley of evergreens, with the crags of the sawtooths clawing at the sky on the far horizon. There was no cell service up there, just a radio and an old wind-up emergency beacon. I rotated with one other guy, Marty Lowell, an older fella who liked crossword puzzles, and never said much unless he had to. When it was my shift, I'd be up there for 4 days straight. Food, water, stove, bed, all in the cabin at the top of the tower. Just me, the wind, and the wilderness. It was late October when it happened. My last solo rotation of the year. The first 2 days were uneventful. I logged the usual reports. A couple low-lying fog banks near Black Elk Ridge, smoke from a permitted burn 2 valleys over. But on the 3rd day, I noticed something strange. The fog hadn't lifted. That wasn't unusual in itself. Valley fog can hang for hours, especially in colder months, but this one was different. Thicker, grayer. It didn't swirl or shift like normal fog. It just sat there, like a lid had been placed on the world. I watched it from the tower as it crept up the sides of the valley, slow and deliberate, swallowing trees and rocks in its path. By nightfall, the tower itself was engulfed. I shut the windows, lit the lanterns, and tried to shake off the unease that was starting to build in my gut. I'd seen plenty of storms and strange weather up there, but something about this fog made my skin crawl. It muffled sound too well. Even the usual night-time forest calls, owls, distant coyote yips had fallen completely silent. That night I woke up to someone whispering outside the tower. It wasn't clear at first, just soft murmurs like someone speaking through cotton. I thought maybe I'd left the radio on, but it was off, the battery pulled. I sat up in bed, listening, and it came again, closer this time. A voice. Right below the cabin floorboards. I grabbed my flashlight and tiptoed to the trapdoor. Opened it a crack. Nothing. Just white, endless fog. But when I stepped out onto the metal steps, I felt it. Movement. Something passed below. Not fast. Not running. Just slow, dragging footsteps along the gravel path at the tower's base. I called out, "Hey, this is a restricted area. Identify yourself." The footsteps stopped. There was a pause. And then, clear as day, a voice responded. "You left the door open." I felt the blood drain from my face. There was no one scheduled to be near Station 14, and I hadn't left any door open. I pulled my sidearm and climbed down the steps slowly, flashlight cutting through the fog like a dull knife. I reached the base and scanned in every direction, but I couldn't see more than 10 feet. Everything was swallowed in thick, gray cotton. I waited in the silence for almost 10 minutes before heading back up, and that's when I noticed the cabin door was standing wide open. I hadn't heard it, didn't see anyone climb the steps, but it was open, swaying slightly on its hinges. The lantern inside flickered wildly, like it had been disturbed. I swept the room. Nothing. But the journal I'd been keeping, my shift log, was open to a page I hadn't written, and across it, in handwriting that wasn't mine, was a single sentence. "You are not alone." I didn't sleep the rest of the night. Kept the rifle beside me and the lantern burning until sunrise, which barely broke through the fog. I tried to radio in the incident, but all I got was static. No weather reports. No chatter from the fire station. Just silence. I thought about hiking out, but the trail would be invisible in that soup. and getting lost in those woods without visibility is a death sentence. So I stayed. Around midday, I heard the bell. There's an old cast-iron bell mounted near the bottom of the tower. It's decorative, mostly. Used to be for signaling in the days before radios. I hadn't touched it in months, but I heard it ring twice. Then silence. When I peered out the window, I could just barely make out the figure standing next to it. It looked like a man, but there was something wrong with the way it stood. Its limbs hung too long. Its shoulders hunched in a way no spine should curve, and its face, what little I could see, was turned up toward the tower, unmoving. I watched it for nearly an hour. It never flinched, never paced, just stood there. When I blinked, it was gone. No sound, no retreating footsteps, just gone. That night the whispering returned. This time from inside the cabin. I followed it to the trapdoor. It was closed. But I swear to you, I swear there was something beneath the boards, pressing against them, breathing. I pressed my ear to the floor, and I heard it say, "Why did you come alone?" I backed away, locked the trapdoor, turned on every light I had, sat in the center of the room with my rifle across my lap until morning. When the sun rose, the fog lifted, just like that. I packed up my gear, hiked down, and never looked back. Didn't even wait for Marty to arrive for his shift. Left him a note at the ranger station. "Don't go up there. Something's wrong." Later, when I turned in my resignation, I asked one of the senior rangers, an older man named Wayne, if he'd ever seen anything strange up near Station 14. He looked at me for a long time, then said, "You ever hear of the Bone Whisperers?" I hadn't. He told me it was an old tale about spirits in the fog, things that lingered in the high woods. They don't speak with mouths, but with memories. They copy your voice, your handwriting. They pull pieces of you into themselves. They're not evil, he said. They're just lonely. I don't know what I encountered up there, but I've never been the same. The woods don't feel like home anymore. They feel hungry. And every now and then, usually at night, I'll wake up and find a page torn from my old shift journal sitting on my kitchen table. It always says the same thing. You left the door open. My name is Caleb Firewalker, and this happened to me in the fall of 1993. I was 34 at the time, working as a wilderness safety instructor and part-time volunteer ranger near the Monongahela National Forest in West Virginia. I've always been comfortable in the woods. Hell, I grew up in them, but that year something shifted. Something old stirred out where the leaves rot slower and the trails vanish overnight. There's a place out there they call Dead Man's Hollow. Real creative name, I know, but it's stuck. It's a narrow gorge filled with deadfall trees and thick fog, the kind of place that eats up sunlight even at noon. The old-timers never go near it. They claim it's cursed. You hear that kind of thing a lot in these parts, so I never paid much attention until I had to. It started with the missing hiker. Name was Jody Harper, 28, solo backpacker from Charleston, last seen heading north along the Green Ridge Trail. She was experienced, smart, left detailed itineraries, knew what she was doing. But 3 days past her expected return, we still hadn't heard a word. Search and rescue got involved, and I was asked to help coordinate the grid. We combed every path, every ravine, every deer trail. Nothing. Not even a torn strap or boot print. On the 5th day, we found her tent not in the direction she said she was heading, but on the edge of Dead Man's Hollow. The thing is, the tent was set up neat. Sleeping bag laid out, food hung in the trees. No sign of a struggle. Her journal was zipped inside her pack. The last entry dated the same day she vanished. I heard the whistling again last night. It's getting closer. That made my blood run cold. I didn't know why yet, but something about it felt wrong. Like a memory I didn't know I had. A few of us stayed the night near the campsite, hoping she'd come back. We'd pitched tents, built a fire, rotated watch shifts, but around 2 a.m., I woke up without knowing why. The fire was down to embers. The woods were deathly quiet. And then I heard it. A whistle. Just 2 notes. Low and slow. From somewhere down in the hollow, I sat up, heart pounding, hoping it was just the wind. But then it came again, same 2 notes. Almost melodic. I stepped outside and looked at the others, Donnie and Mark, still asleep. I wanted to wake them, but I couldn't move. Something in the whistle felt personal, like it was meant for me. It stopped after a few minutes, and I finally crawled back into my tent, shaken, but trying to reason with myself. Wind in the rocks, owl calls, an echo. That's all. The next morning I asked if anyone else heard it. Donnie said no. Mark just looked at me weird and said he'd had a dream about someone standing outside his tent, humming. We radioed the sheriff and decided to move deeper into the hollow. The terrain got worse fast. Steep drops, ankle-breaking roots, patches of moss that stank like rotten meat. Around noon, we found Jody's scarf tangled in the branches of a dead dogwood tree. Mark started down a nearby deer path, calling her name, when he tripped on something. A string. Fishing line stretched tight across the trail. We followed the line and found a hole set up, bells, noisemakers, tripwires. Someone had been rigging up warning traps in a circle. Inside the perimeter were piles of bones, small ones, mostly animal. But there were human ones too. I radioed for the sheriff again, but the static was so thick it sounded like underwater screaming. Donnie tried his handheld. Nothing. Effing. That's when Mark pointed. There was someone standing just beyond the traps, pale, barefoot, wearing something like a buckskin coat, except it looked patchy, stitched. It took a step back into the trees and vanished. Mark shouted, took off after it. Donnie yelled at him to stop, but it was too late. We chased after him, found his flashlight and his knife stuck in a tree. No blood, no mark. We camped there that night. Not because we wanted to, but because we had no choice. The fog rolled in thick and fast. Couldn't see 10 feet. We kept a fire going, kept watching shifts. Around midnight, the whistling came back. Same 2 notes. Donnie lost it. He started shouting into the dark, daring it to show itself. I tried to calm him, but the next thing I knew, he was gone too. No scream, no rustle, just gone. I stayed by the fire with my back to the largest tree. I didn't sleep. The whistling stopped just before dawn. When the sun rose, I saw the perimeter line had been moved. Now it was wrapped around my cap. I don't remember running. I don't remember climbing or how I got back up the ridge, but I came out of the hollow by mid-afternoon, scratched and shivering and half delirious. Sheriff Harlan found me stumbling along the trailhead. I told him everything. He went in with a team of 6. They never found Donnie or Mark. Jody was never recovered either. The line of tripwires was gone. So were the bones. The official report says they were lost hikers. Accidents, bears, maybe. But I know what I heard, what I saw. I went to speak with an elder in my tribe a few weeks later, my Uncle Peter. I told him about the whistles, the traps, the eyes in the trees. He looked at me long and quiet. "You met the whistler," he said finally. "One of the old ones. Not a spirit, not a man. A watcher, a hunter. He lives in places the land forgot. He picks those who stray too far. Some he keeps, some he teaches, some he just takes." I asked why I was spared. "You listened," he said, "and you came back. That's all you had to do. I don't go into the hollow anymore. I don't lead trips past the ridge. I don't sleep in the open when I camp. But sometimes late at night when the wind shifts just right through the trees, I still hear it. 2 low notes, slow and soft, like a song that wants to be remembered. I don't whistle back, and you shouldn't either." I was 34, single, and had been bouncing between postings in Idaho and Montana for a few years. Crowshead Pines, where this happened, sits near the edge of the Clearwater National Forest, dense, wild, and full of places you can get lost in. Beautiful country, but there's a reason folks around there call it the Pines That Forget. The station was remote, reachable only by a narrow dirt road that had to be cleared every spring. By fall, most of the hikers and hunters had cleared out, and from October through March, it was just me. Some rangers hated the solitude. I welcomed it, at least until that winter. The first sign something was wrong came on a Thursday, mid-January. Snow had fallen all night, and I was checking the trail markers down by Ridge Loop when I noticed something strange. A single line of footprints, bare human feet, pressed deep into the snow, moving up the trail. No shoes, no animal tracks nearby, just feet. At first I thought it was a prank, maybe some backwoods kid trying to screw with the ranger. But the farther I followed them, the more uneasy I got. They didn't stagger like someone cold and barefoot. They were steady, evenly spaced, like whoever it was didn't feel the snow at all. The prints led to the edge of a ridge where they just stopped. No scuffing, no turning around, no drop-off, just vanished. I went back to the station and logged it. Didn't report it to HQ. What would I say? "Hey, boss, I found ghost feet in the snow." I chalked it up to exhaustion. But that night I heard the whistling for the first time. It started around 2:00 a.m. soft at first. A low, tuneless whistle, somewhere between a breath and a hum. I sat up in bed, convinced the wind was squeezing through a crack in the window. But then it moved from one side of the cabin to the other. I grabbed my flashlight, threw on a coat, and stepped outside into the freezing dark. Nothing, not a soul, just the trees and the snow and a silence so heavy I could hear the blood in my ears. I told myself it was an owl, went back inside, didn't sleep. 2 nights later, the whistling came back. This time it was louder, closer. I could hear the inhale between notes, like someone whistling without knowing how. I turned off every light, crouched by the window, and waited. For over an hour it circled the cabin, and then it stopped. The next morning I found something on the porch. A crow, dead, wings folded neatly across its chest like someone had lain it to rest. Its eyes were gone, sockets full of snow. I buried it without thinking, hands shaking so hard I could barely dig. That night I radioed HQ. I told them I needed backup. They said the roads were snowed in and no one could reach me for at least 3 days. I didn't argue. I just locked the doors, loaded the rifle, and waited for dark. The whistling didn't come that night, or the next. But on the 3rd day the wind died, the clouds parted, and I heard it again, just after sundown, except this time there was more than one. 3 distinct sets of whistles, all circling, one high, one low, one broken like a child playing a song they didn't quite know. It came from the trees, the roof, the ground below the floorboards. It was everywhere. And then it knocked. A single knock on the back door. I didn't move, didn't breathe. Then another knock, this time on the front. I aimed the rifle at the door, heart thudding so hard I could feel it in my teeth. Something brushed past the window. I saw a shape, thin, tall, and pale as frost. Its arms hung too long, its neck craned at an unnatural angle, and it was smiling. Not like a man smiles, like it learned how to smile from watching one. I fired through the glass. Whatever it was vanished into the dark. After that, everything changed. The snow around the cabin never held prints, but things moved. My boots would end up on the roof, my tools rearranged in the shape of a spiral outside the station. One morning, I woke up to every mirror in the place cracked, split straight down the middle, like something had looked in and didn't like what it saw. I stopped sleeping. I wrote letters I never sent. I spoke out loud just to hear my own voice. On February 6th, HQ finally sent someone, Ranger Paul Latham. He snowshoed in just after sunrise. I told him everything. I expected him to laugh. He didn't. Instead, he took me inside and sat me down. "You ever heard of the Whistler?" he asked. "Not a person. Not an animal. A thing. Old as the trees. Some say it's the spirit of someone who died lost out here. Others say it's older. Something born when the first pine sprouted." I told him I didn't believe in ghost stories. He looked at me, dead serious. "You should." That night we both stayed awake, sat in silence by the fire, rifles ready. The whistling returned, but not circling. This time it came from under the cabin. Paul paled. "It's inside the foundation," he whispered. We ran, grabbed only what we could carry, hiked all night until we reached the ranger's shelter 20 miles south. I never went back to Station 12. Neither did Paul. They closed it that spring. To this day, no one talks about Krause Head Pines. It's not on the maps anymore. Locals don't hunt there. The trails are overgrown. The trees are still. But sometimes, when the wind is just right, people say you can hear it. A slow, broken whistle. like something calling you back.